Chapter 1781. One move. Cursed goddess Soul could not resist it at all, and she was knocked flying backward. Yu's cultivation base was no longer as weak as before. Sitting on the throne, she seemed to have gained the approval of the whole Void City. Her strength was also extraordinary. After all, with the cursed stone, a supreme treasure of the universe, it was not surprising that her strength had improved. Everyone was dumbfounded. They stared blankly at Soul, who was flying backward. Soul, who was in high spirits, was defeated, and she was utterly defeated. The moment Yu sat on the throne, she did not even have the strength to fight back. She had defeated her with just one finger. The cursed goddess, who was once the most promising candidate to sit on the throne, was now reduced to such a miserable state. The nobles of Void City were silent. They felt inexplicably sad for Soul. However, Soul had brought this upon herself. If she had not forced her again and again, she would have brought in an army of soul demons. She would not have brought in an army of soul demons and turned Void City into a world of soul demons. She would not have been betrayed by her friends and family and ended up in such a miserable state. The three great soul overlords hissed, surprised and despairing. Their last hope was completely ended when Soul was knocked flying backward. The army of soul demons panicked. Soul's defeat meant their defeat. All people of Void City, listen up! Kill the soul demons! Rumble, a deafening voice rang out. Above the huge, towering stairway of Star, a black ship was floating in the air. Nethery stood there, her beauty peerless. Her eyes were cold and noble. A green crystal was slowly condensing on her forehead, just like when she ate the fortune flatbread. However, compared to that time, she was even more dazzling now, and her aura was wilder. She did have the demeanor of a queen. At the entrance of the palace, Bufang put his hands behind his back. Looking at Yu, who was a peerless beauty, he could not help but twitch the corner of his mouth. You are finally sitting on the throne. The competition for the position of cursed goddess had come to an end. Hodu stood up. She was not disappointed. As long as the Queen of Curses' throne did not fall into Soul's hands, she did not care. Bufang looked at the little girl. So, what are you going to do next? Bufang looked at the little girl and asked. Will you disappear? After all, the will of the Queen of Curses has been inherited. Kersey rolled her eyes. I am an independent entity. Why would I disappear? It's scary to be uneducated. An independent individual, understand? You stood on the Netherworld ship, her gaze falling on Bufang from afar. Complicated emotions permeated the palace for a moment. Rumble outside. At Nethery's order, the demonic Dragon King's Hall Master turned around. Void City was unprecedentedly unified, and many nobles who were watching the show also made their move. It transformed into a raging tide that engulfed the world. The army of soul demons had long lost their morale, and they had no power to resist. Their three leaders had been captured. What other strength did they have to resist? With what capital to resist? Hordes of soul demons were killed in the void. This was the price they had to pay. Void City was not a kind place. Since they were ready to invade, they had to be prepared to be killed instead. The eyes of the three great soul overlords turned red as they watched, but they were trapped in the cage of nothingness and could not escape. Cursed goddess Soul staggered to her feet. Blood trickled from the corners of her mouth. She raised her hand, but the black orb could no longer form. Her face was ashen, and she had nothing to live for. It was as if all her faith had been shattered at this moment. She had lost her faith. She had lost. She had been utterly defeated. She had been utterly defeated. Duchess Nightmare and Duchess Yunlan walked slowly. The chaos of the soul demons was basically over. Now it was time to deal with Soul. She had to pay the price she had to pay. She moved as if she was teleporting. Duchess Nightmare and Duchess Yunlan had locked down Soul's escape route. However, Soul did not try to escape because she knew she could not. She looked up with her ashen eyes, glanced at Duchess Yunlan and Duchess Nightmare, and suddenly burst out laughing. You've only won for the time being. You can't stop anything. I'm not the one sitting on the throne, and you'll regret it. Sooner or later, Void City will be reduced to ruins and the dust of the universe. Soul gave a shrill laugh. How dare you? Duchess Nightmare focused her eyes. She struck out in an instant. She was so fast that she appeared in front of Soul in a flash. She grabbed Soul by the neck and lifted her up. Soul did not resist. She turned to look at the palace, at the shadow of the stairway of star reflected above it, and at you, who was standing on the netherworld ship. There was a look of reluctance in her eyes. Suddenly, her pupils constricted as she looked at the palace's entrance. There, clad in his striped red and white vermilion robe, Bufang walked slowly out of the palace. This chef, when Soul saw him, she thought of many things in an instant. How did you defeat her? Isn't it all because of this chef? This damned chef had changed everything. He had made all her efforts go down the drain. If it weren't for him, everything would have gone according to her script. She was furious. She hated him. However, she was getting more and more powerless now. I alone am like an army. I can make Nethery sit on the throne, Bufang said. Those were the chef's indifferent words. Soul had never taken it seriously, and she had never cared about it. However, now, all of this had actually come true. That chef had actually done everything he had said. Soul coughed up a mouthful of blood. She was so angry. How ironic. The Queen of Curses hates chefs so much, but the heir to the throne in the end has a chef as her backer. How ridiculous. Don't get cocky, you chef. The Soul God will not spare you, Soul said. You're still so arrogant. Duchess Nightmare's eyes flashed fiercely. This Soul has almost brought destruction to Void City. The little girl and Hoodoo walked out and stood at Bufang's side. Looking at Soul in Duchess Nightmare's hand, Bufang breathed a sigh of relief. Just when Duchess Nightmare was about to kill Soul, suddenly she froze. She looked down and saw that 1, 2, and 3 petals were quietly blooming under her feet. Oh! Duchess Nightmare's expression changed dramatically. The petals turned sharp in an instant, soared into the sky from the ground, and cut through her body in a flash. Slash! Blood flowed like a fountain. Duchess Nightmare was knocked flying backward. Tianlian! She hissed. Soul fell to the ground, supported by an invisible force. A plaintive sigh rang out. Petals began to condense around Duchess Tianlian in an instant. There was a look of pity in Duchess Tianlian's eyes as she looked at the downtrodden Soul. Run. I'll hold them off, she said. I've watched you grow up. I watched you grow up. I don't want you to die like this. If you survive in the future, I hope you can stay in Void City. After all, this used to be your home. Duchess Tianlian looked at Soul. Home? The corner of Soul's mouth twitched coldly. In the distance, Duchess Nightmare and Duchess Yunlan did not expect Duchess Tianlian to show up at this time. They stepped forward. However, the terrifying petals spread and forced them back in an instant. The petals rolled out of Duchess Tianlian's body like a tornado, enveloping a vast area in front of her. One after another, the petals wrapped around Soul and carried her out of Void City. You're crazy! The throne is already taken. The dispute between the cursed goddesses is over. Why are you still protecting her? Duchess Nightmare said coldly. Black chi spread around her body. Duchess Yunlan also attacked with a cold face. She felt that Duchess Tianlian was really possessed. Duchess Tianlian did not speak. Amid the thousands of petals, a face appeared. It was a lovely face. Fight. The 3 dukes fought fiercely. However, Duchess Tianlian, who had unleashed all her origins, was much stronger than Duchess Nightmare and Yunlan. Wrapped in the petals, Soul watched the battle below. Around her, the army of soul demons was wiped out. The nobles glanced at her with cold eyes. This is the fate of the loser. As she looked at Duchess Tianlian, who was fighting fiercely, there was a hint of sorrow in her eyes. Bam! A deafening bestial roar rang out. The ground shook. A peerless savage beast leaped up and swooped toward her. It was the great ape that Marquis Langu had transformed into. He had struck at this moment. A huge palm came slapping toward Sol. He wanted to keep her here. It's useless to keep me here. Marchioness Modi's death. You can't reverse it. Sol sneered. Bam! The great ape's palm slapped the petals spinning around Sol. Slash! Slash! The petals became as sharp as knives to grind flesh. His flesh and blood were constantly being torn to shreds. However, the great ape's eyes were still fierce, and he let out a furious roar. Then, he slapped down with both palms. Bam! Regardless of the blood that spilled, he smashed the defense Duchess Tianlian had deployed. The petals withered and fell to the ground. In the distance, Duchess Tianlian's pupils constricted. No! Duchess Tianlian roared. Tianlian! You've gone mad! Duchess Nightmare was utterly disappointed. In the distance, Sol's face was indifferent. Although her defense was broken and the gust of wind spewed out of the great ape's mouth almost blew her away, but she was unexpectedly calm. I'm going to die. It's a pity that I can't see His Excellency. Many scenes flashed before Sol's eyes. They were scenes of her struggling to survive in the Soul Demon universe. At that time, a man had saved her, trained her, and brought her to the top of the world. However, everything had turned into darkness. All that was left was a beating black ball, which was given to her by that man. Unfortunately, she did not manage to protect it. Roar! Everything returned to reality. Sol watched calmly. She watched as Marquis Langu's huge mouth came down toward her. Rumble! The whole world fell silent. Duchess Tianlian's pupils constricted. The nobles were stunned as well. Bufang narrowed his eyes, and Huda had a complicated look on his face. The great ape closed his mouth and swallowed Sol. The outcome was self-evident. Oh! Suddenly, just when everyone thought Sol was going to die, the great ape's mouth suddenly burst open. The giant ape's mountain-like body suddenly collapsed and smashed into the ground. A rumbling sound rang out, kicking up a cloud of dust. In midair, a pitch-black crack slowly healed. Meanwhile, in front of Sol, it was a tall and sturdy figure. It was the figure of a giant crocodile, with its tail and head drooping. Behind the crocodile was Sol. She had just opened her eyes and she looked a little confused. Ezra? Bufang paused for a moment. Isn't that Ezra, who possesses Heaven God Transmigration's soul and was sent to the Soul Demon universe? Why is he here? No. It's not Ezra. Bufang's pupils constricted as he sucked in a cold breath. Ezra's drooping head split open between his eyebrows. Slowly it was pulled to both sides. Mucus and blood kept flowing out of it. Meanwhile, a figure slowly emerged from Ezra's body. Who? Everyone was stunned. Could it be Soul God? Chapter 1782. Soul God? The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched as he glanced at the little girl at his side. She can't be so poisonous, can she? Can the almighty Soul God be awakened by the poison? But he shouldn't be. Bufang focused his eyes. It was more likely that it was Heaven God Transmigration. After all, the soul in Ezra's body was Heaven God Transmigration. However, why did Heaven God Transmigration save Sol? He did not hesitate to return to Void City, where he had already escaped. What was the reason? This was one of the things that puzzled Bufang. In midair, Ezra's body was torn in half. Slowly, a figure emerged. His slender black hair, which was stained with mucus, draped over his shoulders and looked somewhat disgusting. The sound of panting rang through heaven and earth. Everyone stopped what they were doing and stared at the sky in shock. Sol was still a little confused. She thought she was going to die, but she did not expect that she was not dead. She had survived. Her eyes rolled as she looked at the figure in front of her. The power of sin spread like little snakes, coiling around his body. The man slowly raised his head. He didn't have a face, legs, or even an arm. Only one arm was left. This situation caused everyone's hair to stand on end. What's going on? Faceless, one-armed. Where did this guy come from? A deafening rumble rang out. A terrible rumble swept out. Marquis Langu smashed to the ground. His mouth was full of blood as he retreated from his peerless demon form and transformed back into a human, rolling and wailing on the ground. Both Duchess Nightmare and Duchess Yunlan took deep breath. Who is that? Duchess Tianlian breathed a sigh of relief. Seoul was not dead and Void City was saved. Seoul, let's go, said Duchess Tianlian. Her figure once again turned into fluttering petals, entangling the two dukes. Duchess Nightmare and Duchess Yunlan attacked bravely, bombarding Duchess Tianlian until she kept coughing blood. In midair, the figure raised his single arm and ran his fingers through his hair. Although he didn't have a face, everyone could feel an immense pressure from his gaze. Many people's hearts sank. Marquis Langu quickly recovered from his injuries. After all, he was a chaotic saint-level existence. He stood up and looked at the one-armed, faceless existence in fear. Only he knew how terrifying the aura that burst out from that person was. It seemed like he was even stronger than a duke. A few nearby nobles narrowed their eyes. They were all saints of the Great Path. However, Seoul's aura was very weak now, and she had even fallen to the level of a saint of the Great Path. They had a chance to subdue her. Zhang Xian thought. The nobles charged toward Seoul and the one-armed, faceless man. Marquis Langu narrowed his eyes. Everyone present sucked in a breath of cold air as their pupils shrank. Bufang frowned. He raised his head and looked at the faceless man in the void. That man gave him an extremely oppressive aura. Boom! A few saints of the Great Path, who were approaching, emitted towering auras as they sped away like comets. However, at the moment when it approached, the faceless man raised his only arm. Then, he gently waved it forward. Boom! Without warning, the bodies of the saints of the Great Path exploded. Blood and flesh filled the sky, and even his soul cracked open, turning into pure soul force that was absorbed by the faceless man. His one strike? Did he just kill a few saints of the Great Path so easily? It was as easy as swatting a fly. Who was this man? Even the three great soul overlords imprisoned in the cage of nothingness in the distance felt their hair stand on end. They did not know who the man in front of them was. However, since he had saved Seoul, perhaps he was from their camp. Seoul stared blankly at the figure in front of her. The latter's featureless face squirmed as if it was burping. Then, he raised a hand and touched Seoul's head, his gesture affectionate and gentle. Seoul's body trembled violently. The next moment, her eyes turned red, and tears began to roll down her cheeks. My lord, Seoul was choking with emotion. She could not be mistaken about that familiar aura. It was the aura of the man who had taken her to see the highest scenery of the soul demon universe. It was the aura of the man who had brought her light in the darkness. How could she be mistaken? His aura was countless times weaker, and even his features, face and body had disappeared. But she recognized him. Soul called him my lord? In the cage of nothingness, the three great soul overlords were dumbstruck. The next moment they trembled all over, too excited to speak. My lord? My lord! Soul God! Is it really, my lord? The three great soul overlords and even the many soul demons in the distance were extremely excited at this moment. The experts of Void City were taken aback. Duchess Tianlian's pupils constricted. The next moment, her body turned cold. He's here. That man is here. Duchess Nightmare narrowed her eyes. Are you the crocodile man who escaped? The Queen of Curses had ordered her to hunt down the crocodile man, but in the end, he was rescued by the almighty experts of the soul demon universe. The almighty expert was too strong. If her guess was right, he should be the strongest great soul overlord in the soul demon universe. However, she didn't expect that this crocodile man actually came back, and there was such a monster crawling out of his body, Buzz, suddenly, Lord Go and Hades' era's bodies flashed. They appeared around Bufang. Both of their expressions were extremely grave. Xiao Bai and Little Hu also gathered together. What happened? When Bufang saw Lord Go, Hades' era, and even Little Hu, whose hair was standing on end, he couldn't help but frown. This fellow is the owner of the arm that shattered the primal chaos and collapsed the heavenly deity palace. That aura, it's exactly the same. We can't be mistaken. Bufang was stunned. Then, he sucked in a cold breath. Bufang had long speculated that the existence who smashed the primal chaos and destroyed several heavenly deity palaces was Soul God. Is this faceless, one-armed man really Soul God? If that's the case, that's really bad. Heaven God transmigration, that weakling, it seems that he has been devoured by Soul God's awakened will. Soul God is in existence on the same level as the Queen of Curses. Although you have inherited the Queen's will and ascended to the throne, she is not the Queen of Curses yet. But she wasn't the Queen of Curses yet, so she couldn't stop Soul God. In the sky, Soul wept bitterly. It was as if she had finally released her emotions after suppressing them for a long time. Your Excellency, you're finally back. Soul wept both sadly and happily. The faceless man rubbed her head. The atmosphere was very peaceful. Duchess Tianlian's face was deathly pale. She was in despair. The Queen of Curses was still asleep. How were they going to stop Soul God? She had always thought that only Soul was the most suitable heir who could save Void City from the Soul Demon disaster. Even though she had lured an army of Soul Demons here. However, as long as Soul was alive, Void City would never be destroyed. She knew the relationship between Soul and the supreme existence in the Soul Demon universe. What should I do? There's really no other way now. Damn it! Duchess Nightmare's aura fluctuated violently. Holding a long mace in her hand, she soared into the sky and swung it at the faceless, one-armed man. The curse power spread over the black mace and turned into a multicolored savage beast that blotted out the sky. The one-armed man was still rubbing Soul's head. As Duchess Nightmare approached, the man finally turned his head slowly. His face was facing Duchess Nightmare. His featureless face seemed to exude an evil aura. Then, the power of 7 sins emerged behind the man. Each of the sinful energy twisted into a sharp spear. With a ripping sound, it pierced through Duchess Nightmare's body. It was so fast that it pierced through her body almost instantly, leaving her no time to react. Duchess Nightmare's pupils constricted. The curse power in her was compressed and could not be activated at all. Damn it! Duchess Nightmare hissed. Bam! However, the spears formed from the power of the great sins kept stabbing into her body. Her body kept twisting and trembling from being pricked, blood spilled. Rumble! Finally, he struck her with a horizontal blow. Her fleshly body was torn apart in an instant. She was the mighty Duchess Nightmare, a top existence in Void City, an invincible duke. Just like that, her fleshly body was torn apart. Black smoke spread, and Duchess Nightmare's soul flew out. She was about to flee. However, the faceless, one-armed man seemed to have been waiting for this moment. He raised his arm. His palm split open and seemed to turn into a mouth, filled with sharp teeth. A powerful suction erupted from the mouth, trying to suck Duchess Nightmare's soul into it. Was a duchess going to fall just like that? An incomparably terrible aura pervaded the sky. An aura of despair enveloped her in an instant. Soul God. This faceless, one-armed man is actually Soul God? He was in existence at the same level as the Queen of Curses. Duchess Nightmare had been killed in an instant. Duchess Nightmare howled miserably. Duchess Tianlian soared into the sky. No. Soul. Stop her. Duchess Nightmare can't die. There was a pleading look in Duchess Tianlian's eyes. Marquises and counts could die in Void City, but dukes could not. But they could not allow a duke to die. Once a duke died, Void City would truly decline. Aunt Lien, I'm grateful for what you've done for me, but you can't save Void City. A cold look appeared in Sol's eyes. Her gaze sent a chill down Duchess Tianlian's spine. The faceless man's will seemed to be a little hazy. The next moment, the spear made of the power of the great sins shot out in an instant. With a ripping sound, it pierced through Duchess Tianlian's body. Duchess Tianlian's face was ashen. Sol's expression did not change. She only had eyes for the man in front of her. She knew he did not like people to change his mind, so she did nothing. Little chef, give me the death spicy strip. Duchess Tianlian is a fool, but she's right. A duke cannot die in Void City. The little girl at Bufang's side had a very serious face. She said to Bufang with a serious face. Bufang's breathing stopped. His hand shook. A death spicy strip fell into Kersey's hand. She slurped it a few times and swallowed it. Hades' Era, who was standing next to her, looked pained. How could she eat this spicy strip like this? She should savor it carefully. She swallowed it. The little girl's body suddenly changed. She grew taller and became cold. The queen's cold aura permeated the world. Hades' Era was struck dumb once again. Damn it! This little girl is the legendary queen of curses? Lord Go gave her a surprised look. Rumble! The queen of curses aura emerged. It immediately attracted the attention of the faceless man in the distance. The little girl made a move. She saved Duchess Nightmare's soul and the seriously injured Duchess Tianlian. Her cold face swept across the area in front of her. The Queen of Curses? The faceless man seemed a little puzzled. Then, he raised his hand. The cage of nothingness in the distance was crushed. The three great soul overlords were released, and they quickly flew behind Sol. They were extremely excited. He thought he was going to die, but he was actually saved. Boom! The faceless man's great sins transformed into a single attack that swept through the heavens and earth. The Queen of Curses that the little lowly had transformed into raised her hand and launched a counterattack. Bang! Terrifying energy swept through heaven and earth. Their powers were in a constant confrontation. The people of Void City breathed a sigh of relief. The other side had the Soul God, but they also had the Queen. They would not be annihilated. However, soon their faces froze. Because the body of the Queen of Curses, it gradually shrank and shrank. Finally, she turned into a blushing little lowly. The tide-like energy of the great sins surged down like a tidal wave, heading straight for Bufang and the others. I can't do it anymore. Little chef, you have to hold on. The little lowly sat on the ground and shouted. Bufang! Chapter 1783. Bufang was a little speechless. This little girl is really unreliable. Since you want to attack, just block it. What's the point of stopping halfway? The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched violently as he watched the tide-like attack come crashing down in an instant. Lord Go and Hades' Era focused their eyes, and their auras erupted at the same time. The law of time and the law of life turned into two beams of light and soared into the sky, colliding with the waves of the power of the great sins. Little lowly blinked her big eyes. What could she do? She was just a clone of the Queen of Curses' will. If it weren't for Bufang's death spicy strip, she would have died a long time ago. It was already very good of him to be able to save Duchess Nightmare and Duchess Tianlian. Of course, Bufang did not count on him. With a thought in his mind, the black turtle constellation walk sped in front of Bufang in an instant. Rumble! Lord Go's law of time and Hades' Era's law of life seemed to be unable to withstand the pressure and began to retreat. Little Who opened his mouth. Energy swirled in it, and then he spat out a golden soul meatball. Boom! 3 modern-day heaven gods were fighting the soul god. Moreover, he had just woken up, and it could even be said that he was a little crippled. After a rumble, the open space in front of the palace completely crumbled. Many experts of Void City felt desperate. How could they fight? Even the Queen of Curses was knocked back by the Soul God. Void City might really be destroyed in the hands of the Soul God. A loud rumble rang out as energy poured out. Lord Go and Hades' era took a few steps back. With each step, the ground crumbled. Little Hu rolled and fell into Bufang's arms, smoke rising from his mouth. However, although he was in a sorry state, at least the power of the great sins was blocked. Whether the faceless man was the Soul God or not remained to be seen, but his cultivation base had long surpassed that of a duke. In midair, the faceless man's single arm floated in the air. Behind him, Soul wiped away her tears. The situation in Void City had changed once again. Soul's strength had once again gained the upper hand. Everyone trembled in fear. Bufang's expression was extremely solemn. The faceless man seemed a little surprised that his attack was blocked by Lord Go and the others. An invisible gaze swept across Lord Go and the others. He was unconcerned. Bufang could feel that the faceless man was looking at him. Although he didn't have a face, his powerful aura and boundless pressure made Bufang feel a heavy pressure on his shoulders. It was as if a huge mountain was pressing down on him. That feeling was indescribable. Suddenly, everyone's hair stood on end, and their hair stood on end. A hoarse voice rang out between the heavens and earth. Chef! Chef! Boom! These words seemed to come from a taboo, lingering between the heavens and the earth, like a sharp knife scratching a solid wall. Every slash was sharp and uncomfortable, causing one's body to go limp. Bufang's pupils constricted. He could feel the faceless man's attitude toward him. It was not very friendly. Bufang was puzzled. What did the god of cooking do in his past life? Why were these big shots' attitudes towards chefs so repulsive? It was as if they wanted to kill him. It was as if chef had done something outrageous. Bufang was just a chef, the kind of chef who wanted to cook in peace. Xiao Xiaolong, Yu Fu, Niu Han-san, and the others were horrified. They landed behind Bufang. Bufang glanced at them, waved his hand, and sent them into the heaven and earth farmland. He could not allow them to be involved in this storm. Roar! The faceless man seemed to be roaring. The whole Void City seemed to be on the verge of exploding, and the ground kept shaking. Behind the faceless man, the spears transformed from the power of the great sins were extremely sharp. In a flash, they were all aimed at Bufang. The sharp tips of the spears flickered with bright light. Whistling sounds rang out. The sharp spears shot toward Bufang. Swoosh! They were too fast. In just a flash, they approached Bufang's face, less than an inch away from Bufang's face. Boom! Behind Bufang, the door exploded. The terrible pressure made it hard for Lord Go and the others to breathe. Bufang's spirit sea had just begun to rotate. The spears of the 7 great sins were approaching him, trying to pierce through him. It was as if the god of death had arrived. In his spirit sea, the artifact spirits roared and roared. However, it was too late. A clanging sound rang out. The huge hand fell, and the spears of the 7 great sins were taken care of by Xiao Bai. Boom! The tips of the spears fell to the ground, kicking up a plume of smoke and dust. When the smoke cleared, Xiao Bai's appearance was revealed. Each of Whitey's elbows held 3 spears of great sins. The last one was stepped on by his huge foot. His purple eyes flashed in the smoke and dust, shining brightly in an instant. Boom! Whitey's figure moved. Like a whirlwind, the 7 spears were suddenly thrown out by him. Then, he threw them back toward the faceless man in midair. The great sin's spear melted in the air, and floated around the faceless man's body once again. Bufang's pupils constricted, and beads of sweat rolled down his forehead. Just now, death was really close to him. If it weren't for Xiao Bai, he would have been seriously injured, if not killed. He was too weak. He had no power to fight back against this faceless man. No power to fight back? Bufang focused his eyes. That's not it. Bufang looked up at the faceless man coldly. With a thought in his mind, the chaos pot appeared in Bufang's hand in an instant. Terrible chaotic energy churned in the pot, and a golden light shone brightly, illuminating everyone's eyes. In midair, the faceless man shook his head slightly. He seemed to be sneering at Bufang's resistance. The little girl on the ground also tugged at Bufang's sleeve. However, Bufang ignored her. He had lost face and he had to get it back. Bufang focused his eyes and took a step forward. Rumble! His aura suddenly became extremely heavy. The chaos pot's power spread. The gravel was crushed into pieces. His body rose from the ground, and the chaos pot in his hand kept spinning. All the people around sucked in their breath. He was indeed worthy of being the chef who could push a cursed goddess, who was at the bottom, to the throne. What an earth-shattering technique! With the cultivation base of a saint of the Great Path, he could actually use such a technique. How powerful was the chaos pot? Bufang had not used it so far. In that case, he might as well give it a try. Bufang threw out his palm. His fingers pushed the sides of the chaos pot. The chaos pot began to spin in an instant. Rumble! The aura of primal chaos erupted and swept out from the chaos pot, turning it into a spinning tornado along the way. The tornado's power was too terrible. It was a vortex formed by chaotic energy. It was filled with fear that made one's heart tremble. No one could tell the faceless man's expression. Behind him, however, Soul's expression changed. Bufang's attack was not weaker than the attack of a Duke-level expert. Its power was terrible. This kind of fear made her a little anxious. After all, Bufang had just woken up, and his strength had only recovered a little. What if he was really injured by this technique? The three great soul overlords looked very serious. A chaos pot. Get to know it, Bufang said coldly as he stared at the chaos pot, which was flying away. The faceless man hovered in midair. He had no facial features, so he could not make any expression. However, facing Bufang's chaos pot, he slowly raised his hand. Lord Go and Hades' arrow were very familiar with that arm. It was the arm that Heaven God Transmigration had hidden and secretly cultivated in the chaos many years ago. And now, the arm had returned to the faceless man. In fact, no one knew whether this faceless man was the Soul God or Heaven God Transmigration. However, that did not stop him from being terrifying. Rumble! He caught the chaos pot with his bare hand. Bufang's pupils constricted. Xiao Bai's purple eyes flickered. Lord Go and Hades' era also breathed sighs of relief. Rumble! A loud rumble rang out. An explosion erupted in the sky. The entire sky above Void City was swept up by the shock wave of the explosion, and heaven and earth seemed to be collapsing. Flames surged, and the chaotic energy clamored. The chaotic energy was extremely violent, and it was not the kind that a chaotic saint needed to cultivate. The nobles of Void City looked horrified. The explosion was too shocking. Even dukes would be injured if they went up against him. Rumble! The whole Void City seemed to be shaking. That was because the shockwave of the explosion had caused heaven and earth to tremble. Duchess Yunlan's pupils constricted. Duchess Nightmare and Duchess Tianlian also watched in a daze. I can't believe this chef still has such a trick and trump card. If the explosion had hit them, they might not have been able to resist it. The shockwave of the explosion spread. Some soul demons were enveloped by it, and they were crushed to ashes. Bufang panted violently. Controlling the chaos pot was a great burden on his mental force. In his spirit sea, the artifact spirits were roaring. Bufang was standing in the center of the explosion. It was about time to see the result. Suddenly Bufang's pupils constricted. His eyes were filled with disbelief. The chaos pot was Bufang's strongest trump card so far. Even if he was possessed by Qilin, he could not unleash such power. But in the sky, the energy of the explosion slowly spread. Hazy chaotic energy swept across the sky. Then it was the center of the explosion. Several shadows emerged. The leader was none other than the faceless man with his arm raised. Rumble! A gust of wind blew past, and the smoke and dust scattered. The faceless man was revealed. Behind him, Soul's eyes were filled with fear, but she was not injured. The same was true for the three great soul overlords. They were unscathed. Bufang's chaos pot was blocked. Bufang's strongest trump card was broken. Oh, it's not entirely ineffective. One of the fingers on the faceless man's raised arm was gone. Obviously, Bufang's blow had hurt him, but the damage was negligible. Crack! Crack in midair, the faceless man twisted his neck. Then, his finger, which had been destroyed by the explosion, wriggled slowly and grew back. Rumble! The 7 spears transformed from the power of the great sins were aimed at Bufang again. Got it? Got it. Now it's your turn. A hoarse, cold, sharp, and harsh voice rang through heaven and earth. The man raised his palm slightly and waved it gently. The next moment, the 7 spears of the great sins shot out once again. Xiao Bai's purple eyes flashed as he tried to block them. However, the faceless man tilted his head slightly. The power of the great sins burst out from under Xiao Bai's feet like a huge hand, binding Xiao Bai. This time, no one blocked it for Bufang. The killing intent approached in an instant. Chapter 1784. This faceless man is really too strong. Bufang's chaos pot was stronger than a duke's attack, but it had only shattered one of the faceless man's fingers. For existences of this level, physical injuries were nothing at all. He could recover in an instant. Once he recovered, he would launch a new round of attacks. A terrible aura filled the air, stirring up a clamor of energy that filled the sky. At this moment, heaven and earth seemed to have become dim and lightless. The 7 spears of great sins. The power of the great sins was the extremely pure power of sin, which surpassed the power of sin of a great soul overlord. It was extremely powerful. Bufang had experienced it firsthand. Or it could be said that it belonged to the soul god. It was comparable to the pure curse power of the Queen of Curses. Boom! The 7 spears of great sins were aimed at Bufang. For a moment, the atmosphere became extremely oppressive. Bufang's pupils constricted. In a flash, Bufang's aura changed abruptly. Qilin possession. Although Qilin possession did not seem to be able to deal with the faceless man, at least Bufang would have time to react. With a ripping sound, Xiao Bai broke free from the shackles of the power of the great sins. His mechanical eyes flashed as he raised his hand. His arm turned into a cannon from which shot purple rays. 2 purple rays seemed to have turned into dragons as they sped toward the faceless man, trying to pierce him in an instant. However, even though the faceless man only had 1 arm, he still gracefully pointed with 1 finger. One of them was a spear of great sins, which flowed with the power of jealousy. There was a loud bang. The great sin spear collided with White E's ray of light. It kept suppressing Xiao Bai, forcing him to retreat. On the other side, with a shake of his remaining finger, the faceless man flicked it toward Bufang. A rumble rang out. The void continued to shatter. The 6 spears were closing in on Bufang. Bufang, possessed by Qilin possession, focused his eyes. The next moment, he let out a roar. Behind him, the shadow of a gigantic Qilin appeared. Like an awakened giant beast, a terrifying aura suddenly rushed forward. He charged towards the 6 spears of great sins. Boom! The Kirin's claws slammed into the spear of great sins, only to be pierced through in an instant. In the spirit sea, Bufang narrowed his eyes. The other artifact spirits also hovered in the air. Little host, can't beat them, the divine dragon said. Let me go. In my eyes, everything is trash. White Tiger proudly raised his head. Come on, Boss Qilin can't hold on much longer. If you go up, you'll be killed instantly. Divine Dragon rolled his eyes at White Tiger. However, what he said was the truth. Bufang didn't say anything as he focused on the battle outside. A few spears of great sins had pushed Bufang, who was possessed by the Qilin, to the limit. Black Turtle Constellation Walk, Chelan Transmigration Ladle, White Tiger Heaven Stove. The impact of all the god of cooking sets could barely resist the spear of great sins. In the void, the faceless man tilted his head. Looking at Bufang, who was fighting back, he seemed a little surprised. Many people were surprised as well. After all, Bufang only had the strength of a saint of the Great Path, yet he could resist for so long. It was worth noting that even dukes were killed instantly in front of this faceless man. Boom! Bufang, who was possessed by the Kylan, fell to the ground. The ground cracked, and one spear after another plunged down, turning into a prison and trapping him inside. Little Hu leaped and flew over. He opened his mouth. The soul demon meatball in his mouth shot out, heading straight for the faceless man. Lord Go and Hades' era also made their move. Hoodoo and the little lowly Kersey found a place to hide. They didn't want to be a burden. Boom! The spears of great sins dissipated. They gathered around the faceless man again. The Kylan's possession disappeared. Bufang stood where he was, panting. Smoke was rising from Little Hu's mouth as he lay weakly on Bufang's shoulder. Lord Go and Hades' era also flew over and fought together. The pressure was too great. The aura of the arm made Lord Go and Era tremble from the bottom of their hearts. It's over. In midair, Sol was confident of victory. In the hands of His Excellency, these people were nothing. If His Excellency attacked, everything would be destroyed. Besides, His Excellency had not even used his full strength. The three great soul overlords were laughing excitedly. They were sure to win. They never thought that His Excellency would wake up. Buzz, the faceless man, raised his hand. Slowly, he spread his fingers as if he was playing a beautiful zither. The 7 spears of great sins whistled through the air again. Bufang focused his eyes. Lord Go and the others also felt the pressure increase. The nobles of Void City had long fallen into despair. What should they do? Their days without the Queen of Curses were really hard. Rumble! The 7 spears of great sins sped through the air. The world seemed to have become very quiet. Bit by bit, they approached Bufang. Suddenly, a deafening rumble rang out from the Queen's palace behind Bufang. Everyone's bodies and minds shook. The door flew backward with a rumble. With a bang, it rushed toward the 7 spears of great sins. They collided with the spears and shattered in an instant. The spears did not slow down at all. A black netherworld ship that suppressed the heavens and the earth slowly sailed over, even the void creaked under the pressure. Rumble! The 7 spears of great sins approached. They hovered in midair. You clasped her hands behind her back and stood on the deck of the netherworld ship. Her luxurious black robe fluttered slightly under the pressure of the spears. Yu's face was indifferent as she stood in front of Bufang. The 7 spears of great sins were knocked away and flew back to the back of the faceless man. Sol's pupils constricted, and her eyes turned red in an instant. It's you. It's you. Damn it. That position should have belonged to her. Sol was extremely jealous. When the nobles of Void City saw this, they all knelt down excitedly as if they had seen hope. Yes, they don't have the Queen of Curses, but they have you. You, who has inherited the Queen's throne, should be strong enough to stop the faceless man. Scram. Standing on the netherworld ship, you clasped her hands behind her back, her eyes dark. The ghostly green crystal between her brows seemed to emit an evil aura. Rumble! The crystal seemed to light up. Then, under the netherworld ship, a huge cursed snake roared and rushed up. This cursed snake was completely different from before. It was like a real snake, vivid and lifelike. Roaring, it rushed into the void. The faceless man raised his arm. Then, suddenly, he threw it forward. The power of sin immediately turned into a huge hand, which slapped toward the cursed snake. The instant they collided, a violent tremor ensued. The cursed snake was slapped to the ground. Smoke and dust billowed. Around Yu's netherworld ship, one cursed snake after another hissed and hissed. It seems Yu, who has inherited the Queen's strength, can fight this faceless man. This faceless man's strength has not reached the level of the soul god. He's about as strong as the strongest soul overlord, a perfected one. The Lord Go said. So strong. Bufang was slightly surprised. Not strong. In front of a soul god, I can defeat him with a slap. The Lord Go shook his head. The primitive universe should have existences at the level of the strongest soul overlord, but the chaotic universe doesn't have them. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. Is the chaotic universe so weak? However, the Lord Go was not to be blamed. If he had not been destroyed by the soul god's arm, after countless years of accumulation, the chaotic universe might really have given birth to an existence not weaker than the strongest soul overlord. Yu's domineering words made him scram. The expressions of all the soul demons in the universe flickered. Behind the faceless man, Soul could not help but turn pale as well. How dare you? She bellowed. She could not allow anyone to be rude to His Excellency. In midair, Yu glanced coldly at her. Who do you think you are? Yu said. As soon as her voice rang out, Soul felt a tremor run through her body. The faceless man raised his arm and kept waving it. The spear of the great sins shot out. Again and again, the spear collided with the cursed snake. Explosions rang out, causing the whole void city to tremble. From a distance, one could see that rubble kept falling from the inverted conical peak at the base of Void City. These rubble fell into the universe and began to drift in the air. Yu's domineering aura seemed to have given the experts of Void City a lot of confidence. Duchess Tianlian and Duchess Nightmare looked at Yu with complicated expressions on their faces. They did not expect that Yu, who had inherited the Queen's throne, would have some of the Queen's spirit. Duchess Tianlian's mood was the most complicated. She wanted Soul to sit on the throne to preserve Void City. She knew very well the identity of the person behind Soul. That identity made it hard for her to breathe. However, she did not expect that Soul did not care about the past at all. That was true. She was struggling in the soul demon universe. How could she be entangled by the past? She was possessed. Perhaps confrontation is the only way out. Soul was mad with jealousy. I should have been the one with such mighty power. Yu's strength is beyond my imagination. The Queen of Curse's throne is indeed worthy of its reputation. Rumble. The faceless man was forced to retreat. Clearly, Yu, who had obtained the cursed stone and inherited the Queen's will, had suppressed the faceless man. Bufang breathed a sigh of relief. I didn't expect that it would be you who stood up for me in the end. Looking at the familiar Netherworld ship and the slender figure of the Netherworld ship, Bufang was a little nostalgic for a moment. All of a sudden, a rumble echoed out. Bufang paused, and so did Lord Go, Hades Era, and the others. Duchess Nightmare's expression flickered as she sensed an extremely familiar aura. This aura, she looked up at the sky. There, the sky was slowly torn apart. Rumble. A huge hand came through the rift and slapped toward you from afar. It's the strongest soul overlord. All the soul demons broke into an uproar. The 3 great soul overlords were extremely excited. Among the 7 great soul overlords, Sloth was the strongest. Although he was lazy, it was precisely because of his laziness that his strength had risen to the top of the soul demon universe, second only to the soul god. Then, a hand came slapping toward you. Cursed snakes soared into the sky and went straight toward the palm in the void. Rumble. Under the palm, all the cursed snakes exploded into pieces. Yu's face froze. I don't think it's appropriate for the Crown Prince of Void City to bully our unconscious soul god like this. A deafening voice rang through the void. The speed of this person's speech was really slow. After speaking for a long time, it was as if all his movements were very slow, and there was a warm feeling in his voice. Sloth, great soul overlord. The experts of Void City turned pale with fright. The expressions of Bufang, Lord Go, the 3 dukes, and the others also flickered. The faceless man had seized the opportunity. 7 spears came straight at you. In midair, Sloth Great Soul Overlord's palm came slapping down again. 2 perfected chaotic saints had struck out brazenly. You, on the other hand, was very calm. She raised her hand. Quietly, a flower appeared in her hand, and it slowly blossomed. A flower in the void dares to cause trouble in Void City? Are you seeking death? The flower kept spinning and blooming. Then, it gradually rose into the sky and grew extremely huge in an instant, as if enveloping the whole Void City. The Queen's palace became the center of the flower. Gotcha! The petals bloomed to their fullest. In the depths of the palace, the towering stairway of star slowly and smoothly split open from the middle. Chapter 1785. Rumble. The stairway of star towered into the clouds. As it cracked open, a rumbling sound rang out. A terrible aura pervaded heaven and earth. The palace was shaking violently as if a supreme aura was about to awaken. That aura caused everyone to be extremely horrified. What is going to happen? Perhaps only Bufang, the little girl, the 3 dukes, and you knew what the crack of the stairway of star meant. It was because the Queen of Curses' body was buried in the stairway of star. Was the Queen of Curses about to appear? A look of excitement came over Kersey's pinkish face. Her thigh was about to appear. Bufang's heart tightened as well. He looked at the cracked stairway of star and saw the throne on it crumble in an instant. He was looking forward to it. Who is the Queen of Curses, the ruler of Void City and the ruler of the universe? What is so amazing about that woman who has a deep bond with the god of cooking? Everyone in the Soul Demon clan felt insecure. In midair, Sloth Great Soul Overlord also stopped moving. His terrible aura kept rumbling. There seemed to be a lazy gaze looking over from within the crack. Clearly, even someone as strong as Sloth was very curious about the Queen of Curses. The faceless man tilted his head, as if he was very interested in the aura bursting out of the stairway of star. Because he sensed a familiar aura. Soul's expression changed dramatically. Although the 3 dukes did not tell her what was under the throne, she had long known what it was. That was why she wanted to sit on the throne. The Queen of Curses. Damn it! She's a lunatic. Soul could not help but tremble. The Queen of Curses was in existence on the same level as the Soul God. You stood calmly on the Netherworld ship. The pure black curse power swirled around her. She was like a flower blooming quietly. Many people in Void City did not know what was going to happen, but they knew that it was definitely not something ordinary. Lord Go, Hades' Era, and the others all opened their mouths and stared at the cracked stairway of star. Their hearts were pounding. Oh! The rumbling suddenly stopped. The next moment, the river of curses in Void City seemed to flow backward, surge up, and turn into a coiling dragon in the sky. The water continued to converge and slowly flowed into the crack. Floating and sinking. They were stacked up. There was a coffin in the crack. The bronze coffin was engraved with tens of thousands of patterns. But what caused everyone's hearts to palpitate was, a dish was placed on top of the coffin. Faint steam was still flowing above the dish. What the hell? Everyone was dumbfounded. This time, it was really everyone. Everyone, including Bufang and you, were dumbfounded. Perhaps the faceless man didn't, because he didn't have any facial features, so he couldn't pretend to be confused. Everyone else had their mouths wide open, dumbstruck. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. Fairy tales were all lies. Wasn't it said that the Queen of Curses hated food? The Queen of Curses hated chefs, so, putting a dish on the Queen of Curses' coffin. What was going on? You also opened her mouth slightly. She also didn't expect this. The little girl's eyes were bright. She narrowed her eyes and twitched her nose. It seemed that in her memory, she had tasted the dish before. Lord Go and Hades' Era could not help but roll their eyes. Sure enough, the Queen of Curses was also a foodie. She was a foodie who was harmed by chefs, you inheriting the throne. Come to think of it, it was no accident. Soul's defeat was not unjust. If one were to blame, she could only blame herself for not having a chef behind her. With a thought, Bufang tried to perceive the dish. It was a very ordinary dish. It did not emit any gorgeous light or towering spiritual energy. It was so calm that it looked like a home-cooked dish. However, this dish was like the most beautiful light in the universe, attracting everyone's attention. Even Bufang's heart was filled with a strong desire. What dish was that? Bufang was shocked. He could not believe that he was attracted by this dish. Was it a dish cooked by the god of cooking? His spirit could not get close to the coffin, as if there was a layer of membrane that prevented him from getting close. Lord Go licked his paws. Lord Go, I can't help but miss Bufang's sweet and sour ribs. With a spicy strip in his mouth, Hades Era's eyes were also blurred. Give me a ton of spicy strips. I can eat until the end of time. The little girl narrowed her eyes, leaned forward, and twitched her little nose. Awoo! Little Hu's eyes were bright. Saliva dripped from his little mouth, and he wagged his tail. Xiaopi lay on Bufang's shoulder and calmly blew a bubble. The appearance of a coffin attracted the attention of the whole city. Everyone was in an uproar. What was the coffin in the queen's palace? Was it the Queen of Curses? No one knew. In midair, Sloth Great Soul Overlord took a deep breath and withdrew his hand. Many soul demons held their breaths, not daring to breathe too loudly. If it was really the Queen of Curses, none of them would be able to escape once she made a move. Yu was calm and composed. She seemed to have become the focus of the petals. With the appearance of the coffin, the faceless man stopped attacking. The faceless man took a step forward. Nethery furrowed her brows. Buzz, Yu raised her hand. Her slender hand seemed to grab the void. Then, she clenched it gently. The petals of nothingness spread. The soul demons cried for help in horror. The power of nothingness entangled their bodies, almost suffocating them. The pure curse power kept stimulating the soul demon's skin and making their hearts clench. Soul was dumbfounded. She too was entangled. Life and death seemed to be far away from her. As long as Yu willed it, her body would be torn to pieces, turned into nothingness, and scattered in the void. She didn't want to die. She wanted to stay with His Excellency. Your Excellency, help me! Soul's eyes were filled with horror as she cried for help from the faceless man in front of her. She had never cried for help before, and she would only do so in front of Her Excellency. It was a kind of dependence, a kind of trust. In the past, he had also brought her hope and saved her when she cried for help. But this time, she was in despair. The faceless man did not look back. He was still walking in midair, walking step by step toward the coffin hovering in the distance. There seemed to be a mysterious aura attracting him. Yu frowned. Stop! However, the faceless man did not seem to hear her. Yu put more force into her palm. All the soul demons howled in horror. They found that their minds were crumbling, and their bodies were crumbling. The power of the curse seemed to want to melt their bodies. It was the same for the three great soul overlords. Perhaps only Sloth Great Soul Overlord, who was hovering in midair, was not affected. I know! The little girl, whose nose was twitching, suddenly came to her senses, and her eyes lit up. This is the starry sky array created by the Queen of Curses. A flower in the void, she said. She had some of the Queen's will and vague memories. Bufang paused. The Queen is using her own coffin as the eye of the array? But he had to admit that the name of the Queen's array is really unpleasant. Yu furrowed her brows. She looked at the faceless man, who kept walking forward. He was getting closer and closer to the coffin. There was a mighty force around the coffin, trying to push him away. The power of nothingness wrapped around his body, but it was constantly torn away by the faceless man's single arm. Finally, the faceless man approached the coffin. He seemed to be staring at the dish placed on the coffin and roared. His voice was shrill and angry. Yu's expression flickered. Stepping on the netherworld ship, she sped in front of the faceless man. Rumble! The power of the great sins turned into a huge hand and slapped toward you. Even Yu's cursed snake rushed up and collided with it. Rumble! The whole void city was shaking. Everyone's hearts trembled with fear. Nethery, can you do it? Hades' Era said with a spicy strip dangling from his mouth. Why don't you do it? Lord Go said, glancing at Hades' Era. Hades' Era smiled sheepishly and quickly stopped talking. Although he was heaven godlife, he could not withstand the faceless man's spear. The faceless man reached out a hand and grabbed the dish placed on the coffin. The dish was steaming hot, and the faint steam was like a small snake surging on it. As the faceless man approached, Yu's pupils constricted. In midair, many soul demons were strangled and killed by the power of the curse. Soul's face was ashen, and she coughed up blood. The same was true for the three great soul overlords. Before long, they might really die in the void. The faceless man did not look back. He did not care about the lives of the soul demons and soul. He reached out a hand and was about to approach the coffin. Finally, he got close to the dish. His fingertips kept coming closer. 1 inch, rumble. Suddenly, the coffin trembled. Slowly, it opened a crack. At this moment, heaven and earth seemed to explode with a deafening sound. Rumble! A terrible pressure that could suppress heaven and earth exploded out of the coffin. Bam! In Void City, countless nobles knelt on the ground. The bodies of countless soul demons who were entangled burst into pieces. The three great soul overlords howled miserably. There was only despair in Soul's eyes as she stared at the faceless man's back. In midair, the crack opened. Sloth Great Soul Overlord struck. With the strength of a perfected Great Soul Overlord, he was able to resist the mighty power in the coffin. He grabbed the three Great Soul Overlords and took them away. Soul's shackles were torn apart and taken away. Blood trickled down the faceless man's faceless face. Even his blood seemed to be squirming. His outstretched arm kept melting and melting. Rumble! The coffin opened a little more. Bam! The faceless man was knocked flying away, and his whole body was covered in blood. Bufang felt that the pressure on his body was extremely heavy, so heavy that he almost couldn't breathe. Suddenly, a warm current flowed through Bufang's mind. Bufang paused. It was the system's power, and Bufang was very familiar with it. The pressure disappeared. Bufang felt his body lighten. Looking at the faceless man approaching him again, he hesitated for a moment. In midair, blood was trickling down the corner of Yu's mouth. Obviously, supporting this grand formation was a huge burden for her now. Looking at the faceless man who was approaching her once again, Nethery's pitch-black eyes seemed to be burning with flames. The cursed snakes around the netherworld ship were roaring. The faceless man walked forward step by step. His whole body was covered in blood, which wriggled like little worms. Finally, the faceless man, who had been knocked flying away, approached again. He reached out his hand to grab the dish. Closer! Closer again! The coffin did not open again. It seemed that opening it to this extent was already the limit. Everyone could feel the faceless man's desire. This desire made their hearts palpitate. It was as if once the faceless man got the dish, everyone would be in a disaster. What should they do? They were very anxious. The dish gave off steam, but there was nothing magical about it. The most magical thing was that it was placed on the coffin. The fingers on the faceless man's single arm trembled slightly, and beads of blood dripped from his fingertips. The moment it fell, it was blown away by a huge force and shot backwards. Finally, he was about to grab the dish. His fingertips were just a hair's breadth away from grabbing it. There seemed to be only a small gap between heaven and earth. Suddenly, sorry. Let me take a look at the dish first. All of a sudden, an indifferent voice resounded. The faceless man raised his head. No one knew when, but a thin and slender figure had appeared beside the coffin. Her fair hand descended and gently landed on the dish, directly pulling it open. The faceless man's fingertips almost touched the dish, but he could only watch as the dish moved further and further away from his fingertips. F***CKU. The faceless man almost roared out loud. The whole world was silent. It was extremely strange. Chapter 1786. If he could curse someone, the faceless man would definitely curse Bu Fong 1,000 times. This is crazy. The faceless man couldn't stand this kind of grievance. His fingers were almost touching the dish when Bu Fong suddenly appeared and took the dish away. Is it fun? Can you maintain the trust between people? Boom. The faceless man, who was approaching under great pressure, felt as if the blood in his body was flowing in reverse. With a poochie sound, he was sent flying and crashed into the ground in the distance. Bu Fong was slightly taken aback as he held the dish. He glanced at the faceless man who flew backward and smacked his lip. I'm just taking a look. I'll return it to you when I'm done. Why are you so impatient? Bu Fong shook his head. His eyes fell on the dish in his hand. From a distance, he couldn't see what the dish on the coffin was, but Bu Fong could see it clearly from a close distance. This dish was a simple plate of egg-fried rice. Egg-fried rice? Bu Fong was stunned. Did the Queen of Curses like egg-fried rice? Otherwise, why would there be such a plate of egg-fried rice on her coffin? It was a very ordinary dish. There was no soaring spiritual energy or gorgeous brilliance. It was as if the rice used was ordinary rice, and the eggs used were also ordinary eggs. When Bu Fong was in the Light Wind Empire, the egg-fried rice he cooked was even more flashy than this. It was as if it had returned to its original state. Bu Fong frowned slightly. The egg-fried rice that could be placed on the Queen of Curses' coffin was definitely not ordinary. Bu Fong knew it very well. He narrowed his eyes and glanced at it. His heart skipped a beat. A blue and white porcelain spoon appeared in his hand, and he was about to scoop a spoonful of rice to eat. The people around were stunned. When did Bu Fong appear there? Why didn't they know? Why did he appear there? Didn't he feel the terrible pressure in the world? In the distance, the faceless man who crawled out of the ruins seemed to be roaring. The blood on his body dried up and fell off. Lord Go in Hades' era couldn't help but smile. If a dish appeared in front of Bu Fong, it must be Bu Fong's dish. She felt sorry for the faceless man. In the next second, the food that was in her hands was forcefully snatched away. Yu smiled faintly at Bu Fong as she stood on the Netherworld ship. She supported the formation, and within the formation, all kinds of energy flowed. The coffin seemed to have become the center of the world. Bu Fong was very calm. Egg-fried rice. He had eaten at least 9,000 bowls, if not 10,000. He wanted to see what was so special about this bowl of egg-fried rice placed on the coffin. However, just as he was about to take the next spoonful, Bu Fong's heart skipped a beat as he felt a pair of eyes staring at him. His gaze shifted and landed on the small opening of the coffin. There seemed to be a line of sight sweeping out from the small black hole. Expressionlessly, Bu Fong placed the egg-fried rice back on the coffin. I was just smelling it, Bu Fong said. In the distance, there was a roar. There was a loud bang. That faceless man let out a soundless roar. That arm of his slapped out. Countless great sins gathered and turned into a palm, slapping toward the coffin. Yu's face was cold as she supported the formation. Boom. The faceless man's palm landed on the formation, causing it to shake violently. Yu's body trembled. However, the formation was not broken. The faceless man's move had shaken the formation. However, the faceless man seemed to have lost his mind. He kept attacking the formation, causing it to shake. It was like using a sledgehammer to hit a tortoise's shell. This time, everyone could clearly feel that the faceless man's target was no longer that dish. It was Bu Fong. Obviously, Bu Fong had successfully attracted hatred. Nethery furrowed her brows. With a flip of her hand, terrible power of void rose into the sky and turned into a mandala flower, twisting and spinning. The coffin opened again. A terrible pressure and aura descended upon heaven and earth. Bufang put the egg-fried rice back, and only then did he feel the sharp gaze disappear. In the sky, Sloth, great soul overlord, had struck. He followed the faceless man's will. A palm fell from the sky. It smashed into the array you was supporting. Rumble! The whole void city shook violently as if it was about to collapse. Countless fine cracks spread across the ground of Void City. The faceless man and Sloth, great soul overlord, two perfected chaotic saints, had put a lot of pressure on you. In fact, she could hardly hold on. The faceless man was extremely irritable. He kept throwing out palm after palm, even though his palms were already bloody. You flew up and landed beside the coffin, panting slightly as she looked at Bufang. Bufang's pupils constricted. Bufang, I'm hungry. You turned to look at Bufang. Bufang paused, then nodded. With a thought, the black turtle constellation wok, the dragon bone kitchen knife, and the other god of cooking sets appeared, and he began to cook in midair. Flames rose into the sky. Bufang cooked in an orderly manner. Before long, a golden light soared into the sky. Blood energy spread. A bowl of dragon blood rice, Yu's favorite, was ready. You took the rice, sat cross-legged on the netherworld ship, and began to gorge herself. Outside the array, Sloth, great soul overlord, and the faceless man kept attacking. The experts of Void City looked at each other in dismay. Many of them felt inexplicably sad. They felt that you might not be able to hold on any longer. However, you, who was eating calmly, still made many people feel strange. Nethery ate quickly, and soon, a bowl of rice was gone. You looked much more energetic. Remember this taste, you said. Her voice faded away. You looked at Bufang, raised her hand, and attacked him with the power of the curse. In an instant, Bufang felt a tremendous impact on his body. His body flew backward and landed in front of the palace. You rose to her feet once again, and stood at the prow of the netherworld ship. Her black robe fluttered nobly in the wind. Her black hair, which was tied up in a bun, was removed from her crown. Then, her hair cascaded down her head like a waterfall, waving in the wind. Strands of hair brushed past her face, causing her cold and delicate features to become even colder. Rumble! The stairway of star cracked on both sides. The next moment, a throne floated in the air. You left the netherworld ship and sat on the throne. The moment she sat on the throne, it was as if a terrifying will had been awakened. The sky changed colors, and the wind and clouds surged. The stars fell. Rumble! At the crack of the stairway of star, a huge white arm thrust out of it. The arm was as gentle as jade. The moment it thrust out, it went straight toward the palm of the faceless man and Sloth, great soul overlord. In midair, Sloth's expression flickered. He jerked his arm back, but it was still too slow. The moment they collided, his arm exploded. The faceless man's arm cracked as well, and he took a few steps back. The Queen of Curses? Sloth, great soul overlord, who was hiding in the rift, cried out in bewilderment. The next moment, he grabbed the three great soul overlords' true forms and soul's body and plunged into the rift in the void. As for the rest of the soul demon army, they were all blown to pieces by the jade-white palm. Countless curses wrapped around the true forms of the soul demons, causing them to melt in midair. The huge army of soul demons was gone. Now, the faceless man was the only one left. His arms drooped and his featureless face seemed to be staring at you, who sat on the throne. You sat on the throne with her head bowed. She stood high and mighty like the king of the 9 heavens. The faceless man stared at her for a long time. Finally, he turned his head and looked at Bufang, who was standing on the roof of the palace. The invisible gaze, which was filled with deep hatred, made the corner of Bufang's mouth twitch. All I did was steal your dish. Is there a need to hate me so much? Rumble! The faceless man left. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared. Wait for my return. The chef must die. His hoarse, sharp voice shook the whole Void City. It made everyone's eardrums feel extremely uncomfortable. However, as soon as his voice faded away, the faceless man turned, broke through the void, and left. The great pressure disappeared in an instant. In midair, Yu, sitting on the throne with her head bowed, was indifferent. There seemed to be nothing she could do about the faceless man's departure. The stairway of star began to heal. The coffin slowly fell to the ground. The dish on the coffin was still giving off steam. As for Bufang, he did not know if it was an illusion, but he felt that the eyes in the coffin were still staring at him, warning him. "It's just a bowl of egg-fried rice." Bufang was speechless. Rumble. The stairway of star began to heal. The coffin fell. However, what caused everyone to be extremely shocked was that Yu, sitting on the throne, also fell into the healing stairway of star. All the people in Void City were horrified. They watched helplessly as Yu fell into the stairway of star. Bufang, Lord Go, and Hades' Era were taken aback. Their figures flickered, and they appeared on the stairway of star. However, Yu was nowhere to be seen. The stairway of star was very stable. The throne was gone, and so was Yu. All that was left was the Netherworld ship hovering in midair, emitting a powerful aura. "Where's Nethery?" Hades' Era was startled. "Is she buried with him?" Lord Go and Bufang both frowned, not quite understanding. With a shake of his hand, Bufang produced the dragon bone kitchen knife. A dragon roar shook the sky, and the knife slashed at the stairway of star. However, it did not make a dent. This stairway of star is the place where the queen is buried. It can't be broken with brute force. You can't break it with brute force, Lord Go said. He patted it with his paw and could feel the terrible power contained in it. The three of them flew away from the stairway of star. "You are the heir of Void City, so the Queen of Curses should not do anything to you. Don't worry. Once you enter the stairway of star, you will inherit the Queen's legacy," the little lowly Cursie said excitedly. No one knew better than her the benefits you could get by entering the stairway of star. That kind of benefit made her jealous and envious. As the clone of the Queen's will, she did not get such treatment. The ground of Void City was littered with the corpses of soul demons and the experts of Void City. The battle had finally come to an end. The experts of the Land of Exile were taken back to District D. The battle was over. However, although it was over, everyone's hearts were still shrouded in gloom. Because the battle had come to an end, but the true danger was quietly approaching. Boom! Void City trembled, and the sound of an explosion rang out. Everyone's pupils constricted, and their expressions changed dramatically. It was as if an earthquake had struck Void City. If one looked from afar, one could clearly see, beneath Void City, in front of the inverted cone-shaped mountain, the faceless man hovered there. He raised his arm. The 7 spears of the great sins shot out and plunged into the inverted cone-shaped mountain. Boom! The entire mountain crumbled and crumbled. Countless rubble fell from the sky. A powerful suction exploded out of it. The rubble fell into the void and fell into the void. The lower part of Void City was blown in half. Then, in the center of the broken mountain, half of the man's body emerged. It was shrouded in the power of the great sins, which emitted a suffocating aura that could suppress the universe. Numerous cold chains made of the power of curses were wrapped around it. The 7 spears of the great sins smashed into it. As a result, the chains were broken. The wrapped half of the man's body with a rumble, he sped away. In midair, carrying half of his body, the faceless man tore open the void and returned to the soul demon universe. Chapter 1787. The little girl came over with a spicy strip in her hand. Bufang still visited the heaven and earth farmland. Since the queen had to put a dish on her coffin, what reason did they have not to eat delicious food? What happened? Duchess Tianlian's voice was a little hurried and sad. At that time, Void City was considered a neutral power, not involved in the wars of the universe. The current immortal tree was no longer ordinary. Spiraling around it were streams of primal chaos aura. However, she was, after all, a chaotic saint. Given some time, she would be able to reform her fleshly body. Hades' era, on the other hand, had gone to Void City to roam. If Soul God returns, Void City will surely be destroyed. Hearing that, Bufang did not want to waste time talking. He got up and went straight to the kitchen. "Kersey, entertain them." Bufang's faint voice drifted out of the kitchen. The system's products were indeed exquisite. In their respective territories, there was the loneliness of looking down on all the other mountains. After eating, they left in a hurry. The little girl was unruffled. With a lovely smile on her little face, she nodded at the nobles of Void City in the distance. Little who had been doing well recently. She was Heaven God Destruction, and Bufang was not stingy with food when it came to her. In the past, Bufang had made his fortune by eating stinky tofu. Putting aside the ethereal god of cooking God Little Restaurant was amazing. They were no longer lonely. He had no right to be proud and indulgent. Duchess Tianlian froze. Just as well, why? In the heaven and earth farmland. Bufang was very pleased. After that battle, the apprentice's spirit, energy, and spirit had changed a lot. Between the dignity of the queen and the death spicy strip, she did not hesitate to choose the death spicy strip. The little girl's eyes widened as she stared incredulously at Bufang, who had just entered the kitchen. After preparing for the dark cuisine, he began to practice his cooking skills. Chefs were the cutest creatures in the world. Although he had reached his current level, Bufang did not neglect his cooking training. "We need to eat something to calm down." Marquis Langgu pointed at Bufang from afar. However, they were all resolved by him, and he did not even use the senseless lotus. This naturally attracted their attention. Everyone's faces were filled with fear. He entered Nyo Hansen's wooden hut. Kersey had completely immersed herself in the role of a waitress. The temptation of 3 death spicy strips made Kersey unable to resist at all. As usual, Xiaopi spat bubbles again. If the enemy didn't move, it wouldn't move either. These selfish and greedy nobles of Void City needed to be reorganized. "I'm the avatar of the Queen of Curses will, and you want me to be a waiter?" He walked out of the Cursed Queen's palace. Duchess Nightmare was now only left with her soul body and was extremely weak. The customers who were queuing outside also swarmed in. It was just that, after eating it, she almost exploded. This woman, did she cultivate so much that her brain broke? Perhaps all the soul demons around Void City had been wiped out by the experts of the Void Universe. Many people boldly speculated that the faceless man, who was very likely to be Soul God, had actually attacked that half of the body. So, it was very likely that it was Soul God's lower body. Hoodoo appeared, and her face was extremely unsightly. Bufang returned to the god of cooking little store with Lord Go, Era, and Kersey. This was not good news for everyone. Many people also entered in a single file. It was just like how the chaotic universe had suppressed Soul God's arm. Duchess Nightmare and Duchess Yunlan sighed at the same time. Many people were dumbfounded. Void City was considered a neutral power. Half of a body flew out of the broken base, emanating a terrible aura that almost destroyed Void City. It was so terrifying that it was fatal. This was impossible, not in this lifetime. What the hell? The god of cooking little store seemed to have calmed down. Hades' Era, who was slumped in his chair like a salted fish, widened his eyes in displeasure. This was far from enough. There was not much movement. Are you stupid? Forget it. Soul God is slowly returning. The end of Void City is coming. I want Soul to sit on the throne. That way, she may be able to protect Void City. Suddenly Viscount Ash and the others left contentedly. Once, Bufang even took her to the broken universe. The petals of the pure white senseless lotus swayed gently in the wind. He gave her the chaos pot. Let her be a waitress? The bodies of the dead soul demons were disposed of. The lower half of the body was definitely not ordinary. After that, the two of them left to clean up the mess. What are you doing? The woman placed a bowl of egg-fried rice on her coffin. It looked like she was going to sleep. Soul God and Void City had long formed a grudge that could not be resolved. He was like a fish in water. The war between the primitive universe and the soul demon universe continued. The faceless man began to retract his body. When a saint of the Great Path fought Soul God, the latter could kill him with a puff of air. After a long time, he caused Little Hu to suffer from constipation for 3 days. They toasted each other. He naturally thought of the same thing as the others. As for you, who inherited the Queen's legacy on the Chaos Tree, the recovery and construction of Void City was very fast. It's hopeless. You don't know who is standing behind Soul. Bufang looked at Duchess Tianlian, somewhat speechless. Bufang was alarmed. It probably meant that Soul God was going to wake up. Bufang glanced at her indifferently. A new day of business had begun. Bufang's faint voice drifted out. As for the chaotic universe, the arm of the chaotic universe was sent back to the soul demon universe by heaven god transmigration, causing the faceless man to appear. So far, no one had survived Bufang's dark cuisine. However, the possibility was very small. They even thought of the consequences of Soul God's return. The challenge of the dark cuisine was still there. Everyone in Void City thought of this, and their faces were very pale and unsightly. Kersey was dumbfounded. It was not enough. They learned of the higher realms and stronger enemies. As for the corpses of the nobles, the 3 dukes held funerals and let their bodies drift in the starry sky. The foundation of Void City exploded. Bufang returned to the restaurant, slumped in a chair, and took a break, panting. In Void City, the soul demon universe was very strong and terrifying. It was guarded by Soul God and the strongest soul overlord among the perfected chaotic saints. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. Duchess Tianlian shook her head. Bufang stepped into the kitchen. His faint voice drifted through the air. Bufang paused. There were many noblewomen in Void City. She could only lick the bowl of rice soup that Bufang had prepared for her. The little lowly was furious in her heart. They needed to clean up the mess Soul had left behind. Compared to when they were in the Light Wind Empire, the difference was like the clouds and mud. She looked at Bufang with the most complicated look in her eyes. Lord Go ate the sweet and sour ribs with relish. His body, which was thin because he had become heaven god of time, was growing plump. The 3 dukes had complicated expressions on their faces. There seemed to be an elegant fragrance wafting out of it. Bufang returned to the restaurant. But now it was not used. Ever since they learned that there was a bowl of egg-fried rice on the Queen's coffin, they no longer restricted their appetite. Whether the Queen of Curses of Void City was still alive or not had become a mystery. Get out of here. Bufang spent the next few days cooking leisurely. If the Queen learned about this, she would probably open the lid of her coffin and poke Kersey to death with a finger. Duchess Tianlian paused. Duchess Yunlan and Duchess Nightmare shook their heads. It's hard to say. Who knows when you will break the stairway of star and come out? Huda would occasionally come back to the restaurant for a meal. I, Kersey, am determined to be a waitress. Her dedication to cooking and her efforts in cultivation base are much more enthusiastic than before. The god of cooking little restaurant was becoming more and more popular in Void City. More and more people came to line up in front of it every day. It's ready. 3 death spicy strips a day. Unless the Queen of Curses or the god of cooking showed up, Bufang paused. This was not good news. Bufang, young man. Do you still need waitresses? I am light and flexible. I'm very suitable for the job of waitress. The senseless lotus was quietly blooming. Outside the restaurant, the soul god was returning step by step, gathering his fleshly body. However, Bufang said, After such a great battle and being bombarded by the army of soul demons, he was unscathed. The heaven tree towered into the clouds. Duchess Tianlian's injuries were almost healed. The winner would also get a dish containing chaotic energy. Bufang opened the door of the restaurant. Now, Void City was on the opposite side of the soul demon universe. In terms of the study of dark cuisine, if Bufang claimed to be the second best, no one would claim to be the best. The soul god is standing behind her. I can sense soul god's will in her. It's the true awakened will of the soul god. However, after going through a battle, Bufang stared blankly at the senseless lotus. Soul is a person who values relationship. I can feel it. If I seal your lower body in the inverted mountain under Void City for countless years, will you still smile at me? He was looking for an opportunity to break through. They had all come to the restaurant. It would be best if they never had to use it again. They would work hard to cook and cultivate. The various great cosmoses would banish their exiled people to the Void Cosmos. Their lower bodies were suppressed by Void City. The Void Universe was no match for them. Using the whole Void City to suppress them naturally showed how terrifying they were. He knew that his cooking skills had reached the pinnacle in the universe. In the past, because of Bufang, it was too easy for them to improve their cultivation bases. In fact, Bufang had encountered many disasters since he started cultivating. The cultivation base of a saint of the Great Path was unparalleled. After the soul demons returned, Hades' Era's eyes lit up as he shouted in the direction of the kitchen. The breeze was warm. He was afraid that he could not count on it. At dawn, after eating and drinking, Bufang stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his face grave. 3 death spicy strips? He had not even touched the surface of the god of cooking's realm. Once they succeeded, they might not be able to fight against the soul god. However, perhaps the heaven tree today could no longer be called the heaven tree. It should be called the tree of chaos instead. She could not defeat a few heaven gods who had just returned. All kinds of delicacies were stuffed into her mouth. All kinds of crackling sounds rang out in the wooden hut, causing the peaceful creatures in the farmland to be extremely shocked. She was a person of status. Mu Hongzi had said that the senseless lotus could save him once and ward off a calamity for him. It was a wonderful time to eat and drink. Bufang took a deep breath. Although I don't know what happened back then, I'm sure the relationship between Void City and the Soul God is not very good. During those 3 days, Little Who was listless and could not eat meatballs. Lord Go and Hades' Era stayed in the restaurant as well. In the past, his cultivation base was far from the point where he could be arrogant and indulgent. Bufang's words woke her up. That's right, if that's true, it's really terrible. This way, please. Tell me what you want to eat. I'll take note of your requests. Judging from you inheriting the throne, Void City will side with the chaotic universe and the primitive universe. Hotu, Marquis Langu, Countess Xiaqiu, Viscount Ash and the others. Chapter 1788. Hotu's face was unsightly. She went to the restaurant and ordered a jar of wine. Yes, she only ordered a jar of wine and sat in the restaurant, drinking by herself. Her face was full of melancholy. The restaurant was bustling with activity, while the dark cuisine outside was led by Marquis Langu. Every night, Bufang would prepare the dark cuisine for the next day and give it to Marquis Langu to prepare for the next day's challenge. Whoever succeeded in the challenge would get the food from the restaurant that contained chaotic energy. Unfortunately, so far, no one had succeeded. Bufang wiped the water off his hands and walked out of the restaurant. When Hotu saw Bufang, she waved at him. Bufang pulled out a chair and sat opposite her. What's wrong? Bufang looked at Hotu, puzzled. Bufang had a good attitude toward this cursed goddess from the primitive universe. Strictly speaking, Hotu and Bufang were from the same hometown. Earth should also be considered the ancestral planet of the primitive universe. You should know about the war between the primitive universe and the soul demon universe, right? Hotu said. Bufang nodded. Back then, Hotu and Soul competed for the position of heir to Void City to determine the outcome of the war. The situation is not good, Hotu said, frowning and looking very serious. The revival of the Soul God has a great impact on the morale of the Soul Demon universe. The stalemate has now begun to collapse, Hotu said. Bufang paused. There are so many almighty experts in the primitive universe. Can't they defeat the Soul Demons? Bufang did not know much about the primitive universe. However, he knew that there were many saints of the Great Path and chaotic saints in the primitive universe. The situation in the primitive universe is somewhat complicated. Many almighty experts are asleep. Hotu sighed. Soul God and the Queen of Curses are not the only ones who have fallen into a deep slumber. Many of the big shots are actually in a long slumber, so they will not have much of an impact on the battle. But now that Soul God has awakened, the situation of the battle will definitely change. I thought that after inheriting the throne of Void City, I could use its power to defeat the Soul Demon universe. Now, it seems that I was a little presumptuous. Hotu took a sip of wine and frowned. Bufang was silent. He really didn't know these secrets. Moreover, you should have expected it. Hotu looked at Bufang. Bufang was stunned. What did he expect? You have to make it clear. The Chaos Verse is suppressing an arm, Void City suppresses the lower half of the body. The upper half of the body is in the Soul Demon universe. Where are the head and arms? Hotu said. As soon as he said that, Bufang's expression changed slightly. Hotu's meaning was obvious. Soul God's current goal was the remaining head and arm, or rather, they were the goal of the Soul Demon universe. Once they were gathered, they could summon Soul God. The reason the Faceless Man had appeared was that Heaven God Transmigration had brought Soul God's arm to the Soul Demon universe. Otherwise, would the strongest Soul Overlord in Void City have crossed universes to save him? At the thought of that, Bufang felt a headache coming on. Yes. According to my guess, Soul God's head and arm should be suppressed in the primitive universe, Hotu sighed. She looked very serious. Bufang pondered, poured himself a glass of wine, and took a sip. The news was a little shocking, and he needed a drink to calm himself down. I'll return to the primitive universe first. Your cooking skills have a strong suppressive effect on soul demons. I hope you can come to the primitive universe to help, Hotu said. Of course. I won't force you. It's fine if you don't want to come, however. If the primitive universe falls and Soul God's body is gathered, you won't be able to escape. Soul God's determination to kill you is too strong. Hotu stood up, paid the bill, and left. Her face was very serious. After all, the situation was urgent. Bufang sat in his seat and did not move. Hotu rose to her feet and left the restaurant. Duchess Nightmare's figure flashed out of the door. There was no doubt that she had followed Hotu to the primitive universe. The absence of a duke in Void City would certainly have an impact on its overall strength. However, Void City was temporarily safe now. After all, Soul God's lower body had been taken away. Therefore, there was no harm in going to the primitive universe to support it. Bufang thought for a long time, then got up and went back to the restaurant to continue cooking and operating. Soon, the sky was getting dark, and Bufang closed the restaurant. He no longer needed business points to break through his cultivation base. He had to find an opportunity to cook dishes approved by the system before he could level up. Therefore, it was not an exaggeration to say that Bufang's breakthrough was still far away. After all, the system was now asking Bufang for help according to the God of Cooking's request. Under the Path Understanding tree, Lord Go was eating sweet and sour ribs. His face was covered with juice, but he did not care at all. Instead, he was licking the bowl happily. You want to go to the primitive universe? Lord Go asked Bufang, raising his eyelids. Bufang neither nodded nor shook his head. Hades' era held a spicy strip between his lips. To tell you the truth, the primitive universe is not a good place. Soul God's current goal is the primitive universe. Aren't you courting death by going there? You know it's dangerous, but you still want to go? But if Soul God gathers all his fleshly bodies, it's useless to hide anywhere. Bufang said. At Soul God's level, he could cross many universes with a thought. There was nowhere to hide. I'll die if I go, and I'll die if I don't. It's really hard to choose. Hades' Era ran his fingers through his hair and pushed his bangs back. Suddenly Era's eyes rolled. He beckoned to Little Hu and Xiaopi. The two little fellows were confused. At the dining table, Little Hu lay on the left, while Xiaopi lay on the right. Little Hu blinked his big eyes, looking confused. Xiaopi calmly blew bubbles. Then, Hades' Era put a spicy strip between the two little fellows. Well, I'll let heaven decide whether to go to the primitive universe. If the spicy strip leans toward Little Hu, I won't go. If it leans toward Xiaopi, I'll go to the primitive universe and be mischievous. What do you think? Era's face flickered. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. So casual? Lord Go yawned and motioned for them to have fun. Then, he lay under the path understanding tree and fell asleep. Obviously, he was not interested in such a boring thing. Okay. Bufang thought for a moment. Since he could not make a decision, he decided to follow Era's idiotic method. The corners of Ha's mouth curled up, revealing a mouthful of shiny teeth. The little lowly, Kersey, watched from afar. Xiao Ai used to follow you, but now that you have inherited the throne and have your own palace, Xiao Ai is in charge of managing the palace. Kersey sneered at their childish behavior. How old are they? Why are they still playing such childish tricks? Era pinched the spicy strip by the top, making it stand in the middle of the table. Little Hu wagged his tail, and Xiaopi's bubbles burst. It has begun. The moment that will decide our fate, Ha said, his voice exuding a deep sense of suspense. Then, he loosened his grip. Everyone in the restaurant shuddered, and their breaths stagnated. Bufang, Era, Lord Go, and Kersey, who said they were not interested, they craned their necks and stared at the spicy strip. The spicy strip wobbled. In the end, everyone's breathing was tense. It did not move, it stood straight like a pillar supporting the sky. Hades' Era's face froze. What the hell is this spicy strip? Is it trying to attract attention? Fall. Why don't you fall? Suddenly, Shrimpy spat out a bubble from its mouth, and the bubble expanded to its limit. Then, poof! It burst. A gust of air blew past. The trembling spicy strip fell to the ground. With a plop, it pointed at Xiaopi. It fell in front of Xiaopi. Shrimpy's compound eyes rolled around for a moment. Then, it opened its mouth and bit the chilly strip. F***CK. How dare you eat it secretly? Let go of I's spicy strip. Era's face darkened. The spicy strip fell toward Xiaopi. Bufang arched an eyebrow. Does this mean I'm going to the primitive universe to be mischievous? It seems that the meaning is very obvious. Hades' Era grabbed the spicy strip and shook it up and down. Xiaopi bit the spicy strip and did not let go. No matter how hard he shook it, it did not move. This mantis shrimp is really mischievous, Bufang thought to himself. Kersey grinned. She was laughing at Era for being a fool. Suddenly, she saw the thoughtful look on Bufang's face, and she paused. You're not really going to the primitive universe, are you? Are you courting death? If Soul God fuses with the lower body he obtained from Void City, he will definitely be stronger than the faceless man. You will only be courting death if you go there. This time, the Queen of Curses array won't protect you. Kersey said. Bufang also knew this. Go, lying under the path understanding tree, Lord Go yawned. But before I go, can you prepare all the sweet and sour ribs for the next 100 years for me, Lord Go? Bufang rolled his eyes. Lord Go, Era and I can't go with you, and neither can Little Hu. We have to return to the chaotic universe. If the soul demons attack the chaotic universe, it will fall without us. Lord Go rose to his feet and came up to Bufang with his elegant cat-like steps. He raised his paw and patted Bufang's thigh. "Take care, Bufang boy. You should know about Lord Go's proposal." The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. This guy is really not optimistic about me at all. But it was true that he was just a saint of the great path. Even the strongest soul overlord could kill him, let alone the soul god. Now, Lord Go and Era could not save him like before. He could only rely on himself now. Fortunately, he had Xiao Bai. He had Xiao Bai. "I can't go either. I have to stay in Void City and protect Nethery. I have to stay in Void City and protect you." She was the clone of the Queen's will. At critical moments, she could transform into the Queen and resolve crises, so she had to stay. Bufang nodded. He had made up his mind. This trip to the primitive universe. He would only take Xiao Bai and Xiaopi with him. Perhaps this trip to the untainted land would really be a disaster. But he felt he had to go. It was not only because of his relationship with the primitive universe. It was also because he needed to seek a breakthrough in his cultivation base. And there was an inexplicable voice in his heart, telling him to go to the primitive universe. Perhaps there would be some gains there? Even if he was in the primitive universe now, the soul demons were already waiting for him, their eyes fixed on him. But did Bufang look like a coward? He knew there were tigers in the mountains, but he still went there. With a knife in his hand, a wok on his head, and a stove under his feet, he would surely turn the primitive universe upside down. Chapter 1789. Bufang said he was going to the primitive universe. However, he did not go there directly. Instead, he stayed in Cooking God Little Restaurant for a few days to make preparations. After all, the primitive universe was at war with the soul demon universe, and it was extremely dangerous. If he really wanted to go over and have some fun, he really had to prepare a foolproof plan. After all, in the eyes of the soul demons, he had long been regarded as a thorn in their side, and they would not feel comfortable unless they killed him. Bufang knew very well that he did not get the title of the soul demon's nemesis for nothing. From the soul god to the little soul demons, no one would let him go easily if they had the chance. Therefore, Bufang needed to be prepared in advance. Of course, he continued to enjoy a few days of leisure. He cooked a few dishes and made a few glasses of wine. Although the chaos pot was ineffective against perfected great soul overlords, it could still pose a little threat to ordinary Duke-level experts. So, Bufang spent a few days making a few chaos pot. Lord Go and Hades Era left. They returned to the chaotic universe. Bufang had mastered the law of space, so it was easy for him to send them away. As for Little Hu, he did not want to leave. After all, he would not have anything to eat if he left Bufang. So, Little Hu clung to Bufang's thigh. No matter how hard Lord Go and Hades Era tried to persuade him, they could not do anything. In the end, they could only let Little Hu stay by Bufang's side. It seemed that he planned to go to the primitive universe with Bufang. In the past few days, there had been a lot of customers in the restaurant, so Bufang was quite busy. However, he enjoyed being busy. Wasn't this the life he yearned for? He wanted to open a small restaurant, where the customers paid for their meals, and he was responsible for cooking and basking in the sun. However, the leisurely days would eventually come to an end. Bufang did not delay for too long. He had to go to the primitive universe, and he felt that he might get answers to many things there. In Master Chef Restaurant, Bufang picked Xiao Xiaolong from the apprentices and asked him to continue his business. Marquis Langgu was in charge of cooking dark cuisine. Xiao Bai followed Bufang. With Little Hu and Xiao Bai on his shoulders, Bufang strode out of Void City. He left quietly, just as he came quietly. Not many people knew that he had left. With his hands clasped behind his back, Bufang led Xiao Bai, Little Hu, and Xiaopi out of District A. He did not teleport away. Instead, he strolled through one city district after another. Leisurely, he went through several districts once. District A, District B, District C, and so on. Bufang even went to District D, which had left the deepest impression on him. The people left in District D were all exiles from the outside. Some of them had just been exiled, while others had been floating in District D for tens of thousands of years. At last Bufang stepped out of the gate of District D and walked along the narrow bridge over the River of Curses, just as he did when he first stepped into Void City. He looked over his shoulder at the huge city that towered into the clouds behind him. This city, which drifted in the starry sky surrounded by the power of curses, it had left him with a unique experience. With his cultivation base as a saint of the Great Path, Bufang could walk freely in the void. He could even travel across the starry sky. The bottom of the broken void city was covered by a white bone ship. Bufang looked at it with a deep look in his eyes. Behind him, Xiao Bai's purple eyes flashed. On Xiao Bai's head were little Hu and Xiaopi. They were facing Void City, the cursed city that drifted in the starry sky. Then, the corner of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly. He took a deep breath. It's time to go. Buzz, his spirit sea stirred. In an instant, the whole universe seemed to be stirred up by thousands of blasts. Bufang's aura became unstable. Specks of white light emerged in front of him. Bufang comprehended the 5 supreme laws of the universe, and he was very familiar with the law of space. The Temple of Heaven God Space had always existed in the chaos space. Bufang had found many ancient books in it. In fact, Bufang had even wondered if Heaven God Space had returned. He just did not know. After all, the existence of the Temple of Heaven God meant the return of Heaven God. However, the Lord Go said that Heaven God Space had not returned, so Bufang did not take it seriously. White specks of light appeared one after another. They were the light provided by the system. With Bufang's current strength, he had analyzed their mysteries. They were not the law of space. Bufang did not know what kind of power they were. From the books in the Temple of Heaven God Space, Bufang learned the way to go to the primitive universe. Heaven God Space was a man who drifted around the world and went to all kinds of places. Perhaps this was a common failing of every heaven god. However, Bufang, who had comprehended the law of space, did not have this feeling. He preferred to stay in the little shop, cook, and play with Shrimpy. The light was assembled. An array was spinning in midair. Hotu, Duchess Nightmare, and the other experts had already gone to the primitive universe. They had their own means to go there. However, Bufang had one as well. The array rumbled. A beam of white light rose into the sky and rushed into the starry sky. Huge ripples spread out in all directions. Bufang, Xiao Bai, and the others disappeared in an instant. In Void City, in front of the huge queen's palace, the little girl was sitting leisurely in a chair, holding a spicy strip in one hand. She was eating the spicy strip happily. When she saw the energy ripples, she exhaled with a spicy strip in her mouth. She hoped that Bufang could stop Soul God from gathering more fleshly bodies. If all the fleshly bodies were gathered, it would be a disaster for heaven and earth. All the universes would face true destruction. It did not feel good to teleport. However, Bufang's fleshly body was so strong that even the void might not be able to tear him apart. Therefore, the uncomfortable feeling was like a mosquito bite to him. He did not mind it at all. Needless to say, little Hu and Xiaopi were fine. Xiaopi's iron skin was fine as well. There was a flash of light. The white light quietly faded away. Bufang's figure emerged in an instant. He was holding an oyster pancake in his hand, which still emitted a strong aroma. There were not so many taboos in the primitive universe. Food was very popular here. The ancients said that food was the most important thing for the people. This saying was also applicable in the primitive universe. After all, there were more humans in the primordial world. Bufang stuffed the oyster pancake into his mouth before he leisurely observed his surroundings. There was nothing special about the primordial universe. Perhaps the energy floating in the air was weaker than that in Void City and the Chaos Space, but it was not much weaker. As soon as Bufang entered the untainted universe, his brows furrowed involuntarily. He looked up at the sky. It was as if a majestic will had enveloped the entire universe. This feeling was very obvious. Bufang was also somewhat enlightened. Hoodoo once said that there were actually existences at the level of Soul God in the primordial world. However, due to the restrictions, he was unable to use it. Bufang might have understood a little. In the depths of Bufang was an extremely desolate area. On the vast continent below, there was nothing but rubble. Jagged rocks grew ferociously, forming hills without vegetation. It was a desolate place. The primordial universe was extremely vast, and Bufang was in the primitive universe, the center of it. His divine sense spread out in his spirit sea. In a flash, it spread out at a speed of 10,000 miles per second. Vaguely, Bufang sensed a powerful fluctuation. Go in that direction. Bufang thought for a moment and said. Then, he floated into the air. Whitey lifted its fan-like palm and rubbed its round head before following after them. Bufang flew at a very fast speed. Soon, he had crossed 10,000 miles. Along the way, Bufang saw the strangeness of the primitive universe. All kinds of powerful creatures roamed in it. For example, a huge demon ape roared at the sun and the moon. Its aura was extremely fearsome, and it was actually at the level of a half-step saint. There were also wind wolves that were as swift as the wind, galloping in the wilderness. These savage beasts fought and hunted each other. Their goal was to survive, eat each other, and obtain the essence of the Great Path in each other. The primitive universe's will of the Great Path was very terrifying. Even Bufang did not dare to touch it. This kind of will of the Great Path was the most terrifying one Bufang had ever seen. In fact, at Bufang's level, he was basically not afraid of the Great Path. However, in the primitive universe, he was a little frightened when facing the Great Path. This kind of Great Path was not the kind of will of the Great Path of the Great Worlds and Small World. That kind of will was too weak, and Bufang could destroy it at will. The primitive universe was vast and boundless. It stretched into the void, and there was no end to it. Since the Great Path could cover such a world, it was naturally extraordinary. The huge demon ape and the wind wolf were fighting. After the battle broke out, the sky fell, and the earth cracked. Rubble flew everywhere, causing the ground to crack. Bufang hovered in the sky, watching the battle below. Soon, the battle was over. The wind wolf defeated the demon ape, which dragged its crippled body and quickly fled. The wind wolf had not yet felt the joy of victory. He was slapped to death by Whitey, who had descended from the sky. After a long time, the divine fire burned fiercely. The roasted red wolf meat was dripping with oil. Bufang led Xiao Bai, Xiao Opi, and Little Hu all the way. He was not in a hurry, enjoying the local customs of the primitive universe. Occasionally, when he was tired or hungry, he would kill a ferocious beast and cook it on the spot. Frying, stir-frying, steaming, roasting, and stir-frying. Bufang could use every cooking method with ease. Little Hu's eyes narrowed into arcs as he ate. Sure enough, following Bufang, one would have meat to eat. This is the truth. Bufang also saw humans in the primitive universe. However, they were all mortals. There might be cultivators among them, but they were not very strong. In Bufang's eyes, they were all mortals. The mortals built cities and recuperated. Naturally, cooking skills were indispensable in the cities. He even disguised himself as a mortal, went to the city, and wandered around for a while. He wanted to taste the simple delicacies of the primitive universe. However, these delicacies could only be said to be ordinary. They did not surprise Bufang. So, he did not stay for too long. After all, Bufang knew why he came here. He left the cities and headed toward the center of the primitive universe. more and more mortal kingdoms and city-states appeared. The cultivators were also getting stronger and stronger. Rumble. Finally, on this day, Bufang sensed the terrifying aura of a battle. A battle of this level belonged to a saint of the Great Path. The power of sin spread, coupled with the impact of the magic power of a saint of the Great Path. Bufang sensed it from a distance. It was a battle between a soul demon and a saint of the Great Path of the primitive universe. With a thought in his mind, Bufang flew away with Xiao Bai and the others. Judging from the aura he sensed, the saint of the Great Path of the primitive universe did not seem to be in a good condition. Chapter 1790. The primitive universe was vast and boundless. It occupied more than half of the area of the universe. Bufang hovered in midair, watching the battle in the distance. It was a battle between a soul demon and a primitive saint of the Great Path. It was earth-shattering. Sand flew everywhere, the ground kept cracking, and the sky turned dark. Because the battle was far away from the human cities, the lives of the people in the cities were not threatened. However, the primitive saint of the Great Path was at a disadvantage. The saint of the Great Path of the primitive universe was at a disadvantage. Once he was defeated, this soul overlord would rush into the human city and start a fierce battle. Blood would flow like a river. This saint of the Great Path had just stepped into the realm of saint of the Great Path, so his strength was not very strong. The same was true for the soul demon. Perhaps because the primitive universe's great path was perfected, the number of soul overlords in the primitive universe, which was originally limited, was constantly increasing. For soul demons, the primitive universe was a land of treasures. Unless one was a great soul overlord, as long as the soul demons kept devouring, they could produce more and more soul overlords. The soul overlord realm of the 7 deadly sins was no longer a restriction. It was unlike the other universes, where only 7 soul overlords were born even when all the living beings in the universe were slaughtered. It was like opening the door to a new era in the primitive universe. Although most of the soul demons were kept out by the experts of the primitive universe, the soul demons were not as powerful as the soul demons. However, there were always some who slipped through the net and entered the primitive universe. After growing wretchedly, they grew into soul overlords and wanted to destroy the primitive universe from the inside. This was probably the situation at hand. Rumble. The power of sin turned into a whirlwind, sweeping across the earth and turning the rubble into powder. The saint of the Great Path caught the attack with his bare hand and waved his hand. A vast amount of energy collided with the whirlwind. A deafening rumble rang out. The soul overlord should have comprehended pride and sin. That feeling gave Bufang a sense of familiarity. Of course, Bufang did not intend to continue watching the show. He didn't hide his figure on purpose. He followed him through the air. The primitive universe's saint of the Great Path and the soul overlord sensed Bufang. "Who is it?" The saint of the Great Path's expression changed dramatically. He was in a very bad state at the moment. Once the soul demons arrived, he would surely be defeated, and then this area would be doomed. They knew very well what had happened after the invasion of the soul demons. "Don't be afraid, we're on the same side," Bufang said lightly. In the void, the soul overlord was also shocked. He breathed a sigh of relief when he sensed that Bufang's aura was only that of a saint of the Great Path. However, facing 2 saints of the Great Path, the soul overlord did not hesitate to turn around and run. After all, if it were a saint of the Great Path from the primitive universe, it would not be a big deal since he was weaker than him. However, this newcomer's aura was much stronger than his. Run. There was no doubt that this soul overlord had made up his mind. After all, it was not easy to survive in the untainted land and grow to his current level. He didn't want his cultivation to go down the drain. The saint of the Great Path's expression changed. If he allowed this soul overlord to escape and grow again, He would be a great threat in the future. Creatures like the soul demons must be killed as soon as possible before they grow up. However, even if he wanted to stop them, he did not have the strength to do so. After all, his strength was still weaker than that soul overlord. Bufang looked indifferently at the fleeing soul overlord. You want to leave? Have you asked for my permission? Bufang said lightly. As soon as he finished speaking, little who was sitting on his shoulder, leaped into his arms. What is this guy doing? The saint of the great path was slightly taken aback. Bufang smiled faintly. Then, he raised a hand and gently slapped Little Who on the butt. Little Who rolled his eyes. Since becoming Heaven God Destruction, Little Who had learned to be arrogant and indulgent. The little fellow was slightly disgusted by being slapped on the butt. Of course, Bufang did not care. He slapped him. Energy immediately gathered in Little Who's mouth. Suddenly, beams of golden light burst out and shot into the sky. The next moment, they sped away at high speed. A golden soul meatball swept across the sky like a long tail, heading straight into the distance. With a rumble, it approached the fleeing soul overlord. The soul overlord was shocked. His intuition told him that he was in danger. Looking over his shoulder, he saw a golden meatball. Ting Ting swept his golden tail and headed straight for his face. What the F***ck is this thing? The soul demon was taken aback. He raised his hand, and the power of sin surged out and rushed toward the meatball. It collided with the meatball. Boom! With a deafening rumble, a terrible mushroom cloud rose from the primitive universe. The whole ground seemed to shake violently. The billowing smoke spread out, carrying with it an alluring fragrance, causing many people to linger and forget to leave. The saint of the great path was stunned. What kind of trick is this? In the end, the fox spat out a golden light and killed the fox that was fighting back and forth with him? He had always thought that the young man was the Almighty One, but now it seemed that was not the case at all. The fox in the young man's arms was the Almighty One. Amidst the billowing smoke and dust, a blurry figure quickly darted out, trying to escape. The saint of the great path's expression changed. That's the true form of the soul demon. We must kill him. Don't let him escape. He cried out in alarm. However, before he could finish speaking, he found that a Baiguang had teleported in front of him. When he reappeared, he was already in front of the soul demon's true form. The iron lump's stomach turned into a black hole, and with a swish, the true form of the soul overlord was sucked into it without causing any ripples. How terrifying! What kind of combination is this? Are they enemies or friends? If these fellows are enemies, this area will be wiped out. Even he could not resist them for a moment. Xiao Bai's purple eyes flashed, and he did not take it seriously. He returned to Bufang's back as if he had teleported, looking like a competent bodyguard. He swallowed the true form of a soul overlord as if he had done something trivial. A soul overlord was killed. The primitive universe's saint of the great path was terrified. He stared at Bufang, Little Who, and Xiao Bai. Relax. We're on the same side. Bufang said. Didn't they say that the primitive universe is at war with the soul demon universe? Where is the battlefield? It was not easy for Bufang to find someone he could talk to, so he hurriedly asked about his doubts. Who are you? The saint of the great path was still extremely vigilant. The main reason was that Bufang's strength was too strong. It made his hair stand on end. If Bufang wanted to do something to him, he would not be able to resist. We're from the chaotic universe. Bufang introduced himself. The saint of the great path was skeptical, but he was no longer so nervous. After all, he had thought it through. With the fox and the iron lump here, he could not resist Bufang doing anything to him. Since he could not resist, he might as well obey. So, you're an ally of the chaotic universe. Are you here to help? The battlefield of the primitive universe is not here. The saint of the great path said. Where is it? Bufang frowned. Was he teleported to the wrong place? The battlefield, beyond the 9 heavens above the celestial court, is the most tragic place. The people in the primitive universe are just some small fries, the saint of the great path said. Beyond the 9 heavens above the celestial court? Well, thank you. Bufang nodded. I'm Zhu Meng. How should I address you? The saint of the great path said. My surname is Bu, and my name is Fang, Bufang said. With that, they landed on the ground, which was in ruins and full of potholes. However, the saint of the great path seemed to be very friendly. He told Bufang a lot and introduced the current situation of the primitive universe. It sounded like the situation was not good. The soul demons had launched an all-out attack. Many places in the primitive universe had fallen and were being conquered by the soul demons. Fortunately, many saints of the great path had been sent to various places to guard the cities of the human race, preventing the humans from being eaten by the soul demons. At the same time, they were fighting against the soul demons. Moreover, the experts of the primitive universe were fighting against the army of soul demons outside the 9 heavens. Recently, the harassment of the soul demons has become much more frequent. Not only the cities I'm guarding, but many of the surrounding cities have also been invaded. This shows that the situation in the 9 heavens is not optimistic, the saint of the great path said with some regret. Said the saint of the great path with a regretful look on his face. Bufang nodded. The saint of the great path led them to a stone mountain outside the city. Inside the mountain was a small world built by this saint of the great path. Saints of the great path did not enter the mortal world. They sat outside the city, aloof from worldly affairs. However, they guarded this world at all times. According to Zhu Meng, many cities in the primitive universe were guarded by saints of the great path. Should we wipe out all the soul demons in the vicinity in one fell swoop? Bufang said after looking around in the small world. He secretly compared this small world with the heaven and earth farmland and found that the stability and strength of the heaven and earth farmland were much stronger than this small world. In other words, they were not on the same level at all. Wipe out all of them in one fell swoop? Impossible. These soul overlords' whereabouts are very strange, and they are basically scattered. How can we wipe them all out in one fell swoop? The saint of the great path shook his head. Gather the nearby saints of the great path here. I have a way. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly. Zhu Meng frowned. If he gathered all the saints of the great path here, it meant that they were likely to be wiped out in one fell swoop. This method was really not advisable. However, when he thought of Little Hu's strength and that iron lump's power, Zhu Meng seemed to have an idea. With these two almighty experts around, perhaps they really had a chance. So, Zhu Meng sent a voice transmission. He spread the news to the guardian saints of the cities in the surrounding area. At first, most of the saints of the Great Path chose not to believe Zhu Meng's news. After all, they could not leave the cities at will. If a city was massacred by a soul overlord, it would be a great blow to the morale of the human race and the entire primitive universe. Therefore, they all rejected Bufang's idea. Of course, there were also a few saints of the Great Path who chose to believe Zhu Meng. After a long time, a series of whistling sounds rang out between heaven and earth. One saint of the Great Path after another, glowing brilliantly, flew over. They had been keeping a very low profile. When a saint traveled, the phenomenon was very obvious. In order not to attract the attention of the soul demons, they had suppressed their power. The 4 saints of the Great Path were the people Zhu Meng had summoned. There were not many of them. This made Zhu Meng a little embarrassed. However, Bufang did not care. Bufang, how do you plan to wipe out all the soul demons in one fell swoop? Zhu Meng asked curiously. He was really curious about what method Bufang had to make these parasite-like soul demons gather together and come here to die. Bufang did not say anything. If he wanted to wipe out all the soul demons in one fell swoop, He would need some special methods. First, he would attract all the soul demons together. For example, the soul demon's favorite, stinky tofu and stargazy pie. The combination of the two was commonly known as the stargazy pie stinky tofu. Chapter 1791. When Bufang took out the stargazing stinky tofu, the stench that surged into the sky left Gomang dumbfounded. Can this stinky thing really attract soul demons? Are you sure you want to attract them and not drive them away? Zhu Mang had some confidence in Bufang, but when he saw the stargazing stinky tofu, he was a little shaken and uncertain. Bufang, on the other hand, was very calm. He knew very well the weakness of soul demons. The more fragrant a dish was, the less they would be attracted to it. If he wanted to make soul demons come to him obediently, he had to use stinky food. The stargazing stinky tofu and the stargazing stinky tofu would definitely stink. The kind of stench that could make people fly to heaven. It would definitely not be a problem to attract soul demons. The saints of the Great Path were dumbfounded. They were not optimistic about Bufang's chances at all. However, they could not say anything. The primitive universe was plagued by internal and external troubles. The so-called internal troubles were the soul demons who had slipped through the net. They had quietly grown into powerful soul overlords in the primitive universe. They posed a threat to the primitive universe. Bufang left Zhu Mang's small world. Many saints of the Great Path were hiding in the void. On a boundless plain, Bufang walked at a steady pace with his hands clasped behind his back. Bufang closed his eyes. His divine sense surged in his spirit sea. He was trying to sense the best position. Finally, Bufang stood still. In the void, many experts widened their eyes. Little Hu, Xiao Bai, and Xiaopi were also hiding in the void, staring at Bufang. Bufang stomped his foot. A rumbling sound rang out. The primitive universe seemed to shake and shake. The next moment, the ground cracked, and a round stone platform slowly split from the middle. It rose into the sky, supported Bufang's body, and soared into the clouds. Bufang sat cross-legged on the stone pillar, which was hundreds of thousands of feet tall. The wind was howling. The wind made Bufang's vermilion robe flap noisily. It looked like an altar, and Bufang sat cross-legged on it, looking like an immortal. Zhang Xian thought. A blue and white plate was placed on the round table in front of Bufang, who was sitting cross-legged. A steaming hot, stargazy pie was poured with stinky tofu that was fried black gold. His face glowed with golden light. A pungent stench wafted through the air and spread in all directions. Will this really work? A saint of the Great Path was puzzled. They had come not because they trusted Bufang, but because they trusted Gomang. Gomang was a little uncertain, but with a knife at his neck, he had no choice but to believe it. Let's wait and see. If we can really attract many soul demons, it can be considered as getting rid of the internal worries of the primordial universe, Gomang said. After that, their gazes turned and continued to fall on the stone pillar below. Bufang sat cross-legged on it, closed his eyes, and began to meditate. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, a long time had passed. The stench was still lingering. In the void, the experts of the untainted land were getting impatient. After so long, nothing had happened. Obviously, Bufang's plan had failed. How could those soul demons be attracted by a bowl of food? Moreover, it was such a stinky dish. Some experts even shook their heads and planned to flee, return to the place they were guarding, and continue to guard the city. There was a hint of disappointment in Gomang's eyes. It was not so easy to gather so many soul demons and kill them all in one fell swoop. He opened his mouth, intending to dismiss the saints of the Great Path present. After all, they all had their own responsibilities. If they left for too long and gave the soul demons an opportunity to rush into the city and start a massacre, it would definitely be a disaster. Rumble Bufang sat cross-legged on the stone pillar, motionless like a mountain. His face was as calm as ever. What will come will come. Just when the saints of the Great Path were about to leave, suddenly everyone's heart was palpitating. It was a feeling given by the Great Path. At their level, their perception of the Great Path was naturally extraordinary. Something was wrong. They looked up. In the distance, dark clouds covered the sky. The terrible power of sin spread and turned into ferocious demons, wheeling rapidly toward Bufang. For a moment, everything within 10,000 miles turned into night. Dense black smoke towered into the sky, making everyone tremble. They're really here? Gomang's pupils constricted. His face was full of disbelief. What made his hair stand on end was that the shadows and auras that blotted out the sky and the sun were everywhere. How many soul overlords were there? Not only the soul overlords, but even many numbered soul demons were flying over. The entire area within 10,000 miles had turned into a world of soul demons. The saints of the Great Path of the primitive universe were stunned. The next moment, their faces grew serious. The soul demons have appeared. Let's attack together and destroy all these invaders, Gomang said. Many saints of the Great Path agreed. Bufang sat cross-legged on the stone pillar. The moment the black smoke appeared, he knew that the soul demons were here. However, the number was somewhat beyond his expectation. 10 soul overlords and 32 numbered soul demons. Bufang stood up and breathed a sigh of relief. Compared with the battle in Void City, this was only a small scene. Amidst the black smoke, a pair of scarlet eyes emerged. The latter stared at the stinky stargazing tofu on the stone pillar. The smell that seduced them emanated from it made it difficult for them to suppress the desire in their hearts. They came from all directions and started to gather one after another. The smell was even more delicious than the taste of human flesh. A human? You're courting death. It smells so good. I want to eat it. I want both the human and the delicacy. Kill the human. The soul demons' voices came from far away. Bufang was very calm, and his expression did not change. He stood up, put his hands behind his back, and faced the soul demons in the sky. Suddenly, black smoke billowed. A plume of black smoke shot toward Bufang like a falling meteor. Buzz, a sharp aura spread as the soul demon approached Bufang in a flash. It was a numbered soul demon, a top-numbered soul demon who was very close to stepping into the soul overlord realm. The latter was completely fascinated by the stinky stargazing tofu and could not suppress his desire. In fact, soul demons were all beings filled with desire. Bufang watched expressionlessly as the numbered soul demon approached. A top-numbered soul demon could even fight a saint of the Great Path for a while. I want it. His roar shook the sky. The black smoke dissipated, revealing an ugly, twisted face. It was the soul demon's face. His claws stretched out and went straight for Bufang's heart. Bufang watched. Suddenly, the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. He raised a hand. Then, he pointed a finger at the soul demon's forehead. Rumble, the crimson divine flame emerged. The soul demon howled miserably as he was burned by the divine flame, his whole body enveloped in flames. He struggled in midair and howled in pain. However, Bufang was still calm. The flame dissipated. A numbered soul demon, even his true form, was burned to a crisp. And this seemed to be just the beginning. The sound of something piercing through the air rang out incessantly. 1 soul demon, 2 soul demons, all of them flew at high speed toward Bufang. Soon, Bufang was completely surrounded by them. In midair, Jumang was very excited. They knew this was their chance. The chance to kill all the soul demons in one fell swoop. 10 soul overlords. If all of them were killed, it would be a huge loss for the soul demons. Many saints of the Great Path moved out. They drew the power of the Great Path into themselves. Thousands of streams of energy swirled. Some were like gods and demons, while others were like the immortal path. All kinds of magic treasures flew through the void. One saint after another rushed into the void and fought the soul demons. In an instant, the surrounding area turned into a bloody battlefield. This battle alarmed the wilderness. The city trembled and was on the verge of collapse. The people hid in their houses, shivering and looking forward to the end of the battle. Standing on top of a stone pillar, Bufang looked at the stinky stargazing tofu. He killed every soul demon that came to him. He was waiting for the real big fish. The stronger one was, the easier it was for him to get rid of the temptation of delicious food. Bufang knew this very well. However, getting rid of it did not mean that he could completely give up the temptation of delicious food. The real big fish had yet to show up. Boom! All of a sudden, a huge, violent soul demon slammed fiercely against the stone pillar. He was going to knock it down. A whistling sound rang out in the void. Xiao Bai descended in a flash and landed in front of the soul demon. With a punch, he blew up the soul demon. The situation on the battlefield changed in an instant. The 10 soul overlords had begun to fall. Of course, many saints of the Great Path had fallen as well. This was a battle for survival. Xiao Bai and Little Hu attacked one after another. Their restraint on the soul demons was unparalleled. Xiao Bai killed one soul demon with a punch, and Little Hu killed one with a cannon blast. Soon, the surrounding soul demons were wiped out by the expert. The true forms of the soul demons were howling. They wanted to run away. A dark vortex emerged in Xiao Bai's stomach again. A great suction force erupted, and the true forms of the soul demons floating in the air were sucked into Xiao Bai's stomach. The surrounding saints of the Great Path were even more shocked as they watched. Zhu Meng's eyes lit up with excitement. I must kill all the soul demons in this area in this battle. He turned to look at Bufang. He found that Bufang was looking at the distant sky with his hands clasped behind his back. There were stars in his eyes. His heart involuntarily shuddered. He turned his head and looked over his shoulder. He found that the void there was slowly twisting. Before long, 3 soul demons with black scales all over their bodies appeared. As soon as they appeared, the hearts of all the saints of the Great Path present tightened. They are top soul overlords, existences equivalent to chaotic saints. Zhu Meng's heart tightened to the extreme. There were soul demons of this level in this area? How was that possible? If it weren't for Bufang's stinky stargazing tofu, perhaps they did not know that in the primitive universe, there were soul demons who had grown to the level of chaotic saints. His hair stood on end, and he felt a lingering fear. Zhu Meng sucked in a cold breath. Why have these top soul overlords been hiding? They finally showed up. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly. He had been waiting for these 3 chaotic saint-level soul overlord. Let's go. Let's go. In midair, Zhu Meng panicked. There were no chaotic saints in their area, so they could not fight against these 3 great demons. On Bufang's side, only Xiao Bai and Little Hu could fight against the chaotic saint-level soul overlords. As for the remaining top soul overlord, it was enough to defeat or even kill all of them. In midair, cruel sneers resounded. These 3 top soul overlords were considered to have just stepped into the realm of chaotic saint. They were arrogant and sneered. Humans, how dare you set a trap to lure us? You're courting death. One of the top soul overlords sneered. The next moment, the power of sin spread and turned into a weapon. It rushed out in an instant. Little Hu narrowed his eyes. He rose into the sky. Heaven God Destruction's aura spread. Xiao Bai's purple eyes flashed, and the flag behind him fell down. The remaining top soul overlord approached Bufang with a hideous smile. Zhu Meng's figure flickered, and he appeared at Bufang's side to block the attack. However, he was knocked flying backward by the latter's attack, and his foundation of the Great Path became unstable. Damn it! Zhu Meng's eyes turned red. Rumble! The top soul overlord landed on the stone pillar. His scarlet eyes were fixed on Bufang. He opened his ferocious mouth full of sharp fangs and let out a deafening roar. Human! Die. The top soul overlord slapped his paw toward the stinky stargazing tofu. Then, he swung his paw at Bufang. Chapter 1792. Zhu Meng's expression changed dramatically. He did not expect that Bufang would attract 3 chaotic saint-level soul overlord. On their side, only the 2 soul overlords brought by Bufang were chaotic saint-level experts, and no one could stop them. To them, this was not good news. Looking at the soul overlord who had landed on the stone pillar and was waving his paw at Bufang, Zhu Meng's heart sank to the bottom. Bufang's aura was very strong, and he should be ranked among the saints of the Great Path. However, in the face of a chaotic saint, an opponent of a different level, he could not resist at all. He might be killed in an instant. There was panic in Zhu Meng's eyes now. They had planned to catch all the soul demons in one fell swoop, but now they were tied down, which made it very likely that they would be caught by the soul demons in one fell swoop. Grievance, pain, despair, for a moment, all kinds of emotions rushed into Zhu Meng's heart. On the stone pillar, the roaring soul demon looked like a ferocious demon. His mouth was wide open, and the rows of sharp teeth in his mouth glinted coldly. The paw, which seemed to be able to shatter heaven and earth, went straight toward Bufang's head. He wanted to kill Bufang with one slap. Meanwhile, his other hand reached for the stinky stargazing tofu. It was this thing that deeply attracted them. He wanted to get it, and he wanted to devour it. Bufang watched indifferently. The paw was getting closer and closer to him. Bufang's face was expressionless, and he was extremely calm. Zhu Meng, on the other hand, felt his heart almost jump out of his throat, and he felt his breathing become rapid. "Run!" Gomeng roared. However, the only response he got was an indifferent look from Bufang. "Run? In my dictionary, Bufang. There's no such thing as run," Bufang said. The huge soul overlord sneered. The paw slapped down. "You're courting death, human." Boom. The paw fell. The whole stone pillar collapsed in an instant. A beam of golden light slashed across it. A claw soared into the sky, and black blood spurted out from it. The top-grade soul overlord roared in disbelief. His arm was chopped off and in the distance. Among the shattered stone pillars, a figure quietly floated in the air. The figure held a golden kitchen knife in his hand. The golden blade and the golden hilt emitted a dazzling radiance. Golden dragon bone kitchen knife. And Bufang's hair also turned golden in an instant. Yo! I, Nicholas the Handsome Dragon, can finally come out for some fresh air. The blonde Bufang grinned and laughed. In the distance, roared the top-grade soul overlord. He grabbed the heaven-gazing stinky tofu in his hand and rolled his eyes. Eat it if you can. Blonde-haired Bufang shouted from afar. No. You're this handsome dragon's grandson. Gomeng was dumbfounded as he looked at the completely different Bufang, at a loss as to what to do. However, it was already very good that he didn't die. That was a top-grade soul overlord, a chaotic saint-level existence. Even he would have died under that claw. Only a genius among the saints of the Great Path could fight him. However, those geniuses were now fighting the army of soul demons on the battlefield. The soul overlord sneered. He grabbed the heaven-gazing stinky tofu with his huge palm and shoved it into his mouth. Wasn't he attracted here for this stinky-gazing tofu? Did he not dare to eat it? Did he really want to be a grandson? Ridiculous blonde-haired Bufang continued to shout in the distance, saying several words every second. He was completely different from the aloof Bufang. This also stunned many saints of the Great Path of the primitive universe. Munch. The soul overlord shoved the stinky-gazing tofu into his mouth and began to chew. After chewing for a while, a delicious aroma spread in his mouth. The next moment, his eyes were bloodshot. Rumble. His dark skin, which was covered in scales, began to emit crimson-red flames, incessantly burning his body. Damn it! That thing is poisonous. The Soul Overlord growled. Grandson, it's not poisonous. It's just that you're not used to it. Blonde-haired Bufang said with a wicked grin. Then, he twirled the dragon bone kitchen knife in his hand. The restraining effect of Bufang's food on soul demons was beyond their imagination. Even the soul god wanted to kill Bufang, not to mention this soul overlord in front of them. After eating Bufang's food, he felt as if he was going to burn himself. He could not move at all. A ray of light arrived first, and then the knife came out like a dragon. Blonde-haired Bufang flew on the knife and slashed down. Accompanied by a golden dragon roar, a terrible dragon might filled the air. A slash rang out. The knife passed in a flash. The top soul overlord's head was cut off, and his body shot into the sky. Blonde-haired Bufang flew up and kicked the head away like a ball. The kick was extremely accurate. It smashed an ordinary soul overlord to pieces. Blonde-haired Bufang smiled, raised the knife, and swung it down. There was a flash of knife light. Then, the huge top soul overlord's body was sliced into pieces. With a wave of his hand, he put away all the pieces. Blonde-haired Bufang twirled the knife with a relaxed look on his face. Zhu Mang was dumbfounded. It's over? He, who had always thought that little Hu and Xiao Bai were the big shots, was wrong again. The real big shot was actually Bufang. This was too surprising. Blonde-haired Bufang turned his head and saw Zhu Mang staring at him, dumbfounded. His right eye blinked slightly as if it was emitting a wave of electricity. Am I handsome? Buzz, as soon as the words came out of his mouth, his blonde hair retreated. Black-haired Bufang returned, his face expressionless. He ignored Zhu Mang, who was terrified by the electricity. Bufang looked indifferently at Xiao Bai. Xiao Bai. As soon as his voice rang out, a soul demon's true form rose into the sky from the sliced soul overlord's body. It bared its fangs and brandished its claws as it fled into the distance. Xiao Bai's purple eyes flashed. Then, his abdomen turned into a vortex and sucked the fleeing soul demon's true form into it. The purple color in his eyes grew deeper and deeper. Ah! Da-da-da-da-da! Little Hu kept spewing golden soul meatballs from her mouth. The top soul overlord who was fighting her fled with his hands over his head. The explosion of each soul meatball was earth-shattering. With each explosion, a top-grade soul master was injured. After a long time, the top soul overlord, who was as strong as a chaotic saint-level soul overlord, was blown into a pile of minced meat. At this time, Foxy paused, still wishing for more. She opened her mouth slightly, and green smoke spread out from it. Xiao Bai was even more direct. 3 flags fell, pierced the top soul overlord, and froze him in midair. Then, holding the metal spear, he stabbed it again and again. Just like that, the battle was over. The surrounding saints of the Great Path felt their blood run cold. What kind of freaking monsters were these? Putting aside Bufang, whose personality had changed drastically. Just little Hu and the Iron Lump were enough to frighten them. Those were 3 chaotic saint-level soul overlords. However, these experts might not know this. After all, Foxy and Whitey were existences that could fight Duke-class powerhouses. In other words, they could fight great soul overlords. To them, these soul overlords were nothing. The defeat of the top soul overlords was a disaster for the other soul demons. They fled like madmen, losing the will to fight. Zhu Mang's expression changed dramatically. We can't let them escape. This was a rare opportunity. If they let them escape, it would be a disaster for them again. Zhu Mang roared. However, his words were soon stuck in his throat. There's no hurry, Bufang said lightly. With a thought in his mind, suddenly, numerous stargazy pies emerged around him. A pungent stench wafted through the air once again. The faces of the surrounding saints of the Great Path turned black. What a freaking weird way of fighting! Sure enough, as soon as the stargazy pies appeared, the soul demons who had flown away flew back with struggling faces. Bufang flicked his finger. One stargazy pies after another shot out. The soul demons pounced on them. In the end, they ate the stargazy pies, burned by the crimson divine flame, and turned into ashes. The battle ended unexpectedly quickly. Rumble! Xiaobai landed with a crash, shaking the ground. Little Hu climbed onto his back, wagging his fluffy tail. Xiaopi lay on Xiaobai's head and blew bubbles. Bufang walked in front with his hands clasped behind his back. Ju Mang and the other saints of the great path of the primitive universe sucked in a cold breath when they saw this group. It seemed that a group of extraordinary existences had come to the primitive universe. The surrounding soul demons should be gone, and the remaining small soul demons should not be a problem, Bufang said. Ju Mang and the other saints of the great path walked over with much more respectful looks on their faces. Thank you for your help. Killing these soul demons is a great merit, Ju Mang said. Bufang waved his hand and looked at Ju Mang. I need to go to the battlefield. Do you know how to get there? Bufang asked. The battlefield is above the celestial court, beyond the ninth heaven. It's a long journey to the ninth heaven, Ju Mang said with a smile. Now that the disaster of the soul demons was over, the pressure on them had lessened a lot. Let me lead the way for you. Now that the disaster of the soul demons is over, it's time for me to go to the ninth heaven and fight for the primitive universe. Bufang paused. He was not used to this guy's sudden enthusiasm. However, Bufang did not refuse. Many saints of the Great Path also wanted to join, but Ju Mang told them not to. After all, the soul demons still existed, and the primitive universe still needed protection. The others did not insist. They had no choice but to take a step back. After some rest, Ju Mang summoned a huge black and white crane with feathers fluttering in the wind. He asked Bufang and the others to get on its back. The crane spread its wings and flew unhurriedly toward the ninth heaven. Down below, a group of saints of the Great Path was waving goodbye to them. The crane flew higher and higher. The vast and boundless great wasteland continent gradually turned blurry. Clouds rose in spirals, obscuring the view. Sitting on the crane's back, Ju Mang's face was very grave. The situation on the battlefield was not very good. He was ready to die. Your crane is too fat and flies too slowly. Bufang stroked the crane's feathers and said indifferently. The crane that had spread its wings and soared into the sky trembled. It was so scared that it almost fell from the sky. However, it was Ju Mang's reassurance that stabilized it. Bufang's chef's aura made the crane tremble. The crane had a spirit, so it was really afraid that it would be cooked by the chef and turned into a delicacy. The red-crowned crane was flying leisurely. The primitive universe was vast and full of wonders. There was a towering heaven mountain. There was a jade lake with rippling blue waves. And there was a sea of flames. All these wonders made Bufang sigh with emotion. It flew past the first heaven and up to the second heaven. The crane flew leisurely, getting closer and closer to the celestial court. Finally, after flying for a long time, after Bufang and the others had eaten several plates of spicy blood lobsters, the red-crowned crane finally flew to the Nine Heavens Imperial Court, in front of the Celestial Court. The pavilions of the Immortal Court that were hidden in the layers of clouds were floating in spirals, looking extremely mystical. That was the primitive universe's main force against the soul demons. It was the primitive universe's main force against the soul demons. When the crane flew to the Celestial Court's gate, which towered into the starry sky, a figure that Bufang was quite familiar with appeared in front of him. Chapter 1793. The Immortal Court floated in the clouds. The clouds in the nine heavens were multicolored clouds that emitted mystical and immortal light. The gates of the Immortal Court towered into the clouds, and one could not see the end of it. Although it seemed like they had arrived quickly, the red-crowned crane flapped its wings slowly and flew for a long time. In the distance, a silhouette flew over. Before the person arrived, a dog's bark resounded. The figure of a black dog lunged at the red-crowned crane in the sky like a madman. It frightened the crane beneath Gomang so much that it trembled, nearly dropping its feathers. "Howling celestial dog?" Gomang exclaimed. The black dog flew over and leaped into the air. Saliva flew out of its mouth, and its eyes were filled with excitement. Howling celestial dog was the spirit beast of true Lord Erlang, the little saint of the celestial court. It was said that true Lord Erlang had returned from the ancestral planet and comprehended the heavenly Tao. A few days ago, he had become a saint of the great path like him, but his fighting prowess was far inferior to him. Even the celestial hound's cultivation base soared, and it broke into the level of a saint of the great path. This made many in the untainted universe envious, and the ancestral star even more so. Many wanted to visit the ancestral planet. However, he was stopped by a mighty figure who had awakened in the primordial world. Very few could set foot on the ancestral star now. The howling celestial dog pounced over, its tongue moving in a messy manner, accompanied by the barking of a dog. A hand reached out and gripped the dog's neck, causing the howling celestial dog's body to freeze in the void. The dog's paws were slightly bent, its head was tilted, and its eyes were wide open. It was motionless, and its tail was wagging from side to side. Woof! The celestial hound barked. The crane shuddered. Bufang strangled the celestial hound's neck and stared at the black dog indifferently. "Awo!" Xiao Tianquan shriveled up. Bufang's gaze made it feel as if it was going to become a pot of dog meat in the next moment. Little Hu came out from behind Bufang. He squinted his eyes and stared at the celestial hound. The celestial hound was excited again and wagged its tail. However, Little Hu snorted disdainfully and flicked his fox tail at it. The aura of the heavenly destruction god erupted from his body. The howling celestial dog shrank again. Xiao Bai's purple eyes swept over. That sharp purple gaze made Xiao Tianquan bury its head in Bufang's hands and shrink into a ball. After all, it was not Lord Go. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. Celestial hound? He had seen the howling celestial dog on Earth, but he didn't expect it to appear here. If howling celestial dog was here, then, in the distance, a cloud flew by. A tall and sturdy figure flew over. "Who? How dare you trespass the immortal court?" Yang Jian shouted loudly. Then, holding the three-pointed, double-edged blade, he dashed forward at high speed. The fact that the howling celestial dog had stopped moving gave him a fright. When he got closer, he found Bufang. Yang Jian had a deep impression of Bufang. This awesome little chef, Bufang let go of the howling celestial dog's neck, and it hurriedly crawled back to Yang Jian's side, obediently lying by his feet. In order not to become a dog stew pot, it had better be obedient. True Lord Erlang. When Zhu Mang saw Yang Jian, he hurriedly cupped his hands. Yang Jian returned the greeting. "Fellow Taoist, why did you come to the immortal court? Now is a special time. Shouldn't you protect the primitive land?" Yang Jian asked, puzzled. Zhu Mang told Yang Jian about the matter, causing the latter's eyes to brighten. "Owner Bu, long time no see. Your cultivation base has improved greatly," Yang Jian said to Bufang with a smile. Bufang nodded indifferently and glanced at the howling celestial dog. His cold gaze scared the dog so much that it tucked its tail between its legs. "Long time no see. Howling celestial dog has become fat again," Bufang said. The howling celestial dog's fur bristled. Yang Jian laughed dryly. This dog had become a foodie just after returning from Earth. How many times had it ransacked the celestial court's kitchen? However, Yang Jian would not expose the dog's shortcomings. He just smiled. "Didn't you go to the battlefield?" Bufang looked at Yang Jian, puzzled. "I was ordered by the Celestial Emperor to guard the Celestial Court," Yang Jian said seriously. "Now that the soul demons are in power, The soul demon universe is attacking the primitive universe with all its might, causing the immortals and deities to panic. The immortals and deities of the celestial court have joined forces to fight against the enemy. Bufang nodded. They landed outside the gates of the celestial court. This was the heavenly gate, and at the bottom of the gate stood the heavenly soldiers of the immortal court, who were panting heavily. These soldiers were neither weak nor strong, and their momentum was impressive. Hudu asked me to help you, so here I am. How do we get to the battlefield? Bufang asked Yang Jian. Yang Jian's eyes lit up. There's no hurry. The front line is now in a stalemate. The main reason is that one of our almighty experts has awakened. Oh? An almighty expert of the primitive universe? Who is it? Bufang paused. You know him. The corner of Yang Jian's mouth twitched slightly. Sect leader Tong Tian. He wanted to break the shackles and learn the holy power. Although he failed, he created a clone and returned from the ancestral planet. His clone and his true form became one, and his strength soared. He deployed the immortal slaughtering sword array and slaughtered all the soul demons in the starry sky. He fought against 3 Sin great soul overlords and repelled the army of soul demons. Yang Jian exhaled. Although he was in the celestial court, he knew the situation at the front line like the back of his hand. After all, he had to get the battle reports first before they were passed to the celestial emperor. Oh, Tong Tian is so strong? Bufang was shocked. Tong Tian was already a wild and unrestrained man when he was on the ancestral planet. No wonder he was so domineering. It turned out that he was just a clone. However, now that he has awakened his true form, he can fight 3 great soul overlords without being defeated. His strength should be close to that of the strongest great soul overlord. Bufang knew how strong the strongest great soul overlord was. Even if he was possessed by Qilin, it would be useless for him to face them now. Well, let's not talk about that. It's useless for you to go to the battlefield now. The battle is in a stalemate, and the army of soul demons seems to be waiting for something. Yang Jian said. He led Bufang and the others into the celestial court through the heavenly gate. Bufang walked with his hands clasped behind his back. Many immortals were walking in the celestial court. There were pavilions, terraces, gurgling water, ethereal music, and clouds drifting in the air. It did have the style of the celestial court. Many of the immortals here were not very strong, and their purpose was to benefit the mortals of the primitive continent. Yang Jian was very prestigious. As he walked past with the celestial hound, many immortals greeted him. The celestial hound walked away with its tail between its legs, not daring to look at Bufang. Many immortals were curious about Bufang, but Bufang only nodded. Soon, they arrived at an immortal palace. Yang Jian invited Bufang in and sent someone to bring the celestial court's wine. Zhu Meng's eyes lit up. It was a rare opportunity to drink the wine of the celestial court. Yang Jian clearly had a purpose for inviting Bufang to a banquet. However, Bufang was not in a hurry. He ate and drank. In Bufang's opinion, the cooking skills of the chefs of the celestial court were passable. The dishes tasted good and were very fancy. Dishes such as dragon dancing in the 9 heavens, 9 phoenixes appear, and dragon's whiskers shake the heavens and earth made Bufang click his tongue. It's just dragon meat stew, immortal chicken roast, and dragon whiskers noodles. However, what really interested Bufang was the wine. As he took a sip of the wine, the fragrance of flowers burst into his mouth, along with the fragrance of a young girl. An illusion appeared in front of him, and the girl's smiling face appeared. This is the best wine of the celestial court, the Fairy 100 Flowers wine. It was brewed by the daughter of the celestial emperor, the 7 fairies, from the 100-flower rain and dew of the celestial court's 100-flower garden. Yang Jian laughed. He carefully poured a cup of wine and took a sip. He narrowed his eyes, reveling in it. Bufang had to praise this wine. Although it did not increase his cultivation base as much as the wine brewed by Bufang, it tasted very good. It was a pity that this wine went with these dishes. The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched. His mind flickered. The white tiger heaven stove, the dragon bone kitchen knife, and the black turtle constellation wok all appeared. Bufang cooked a dish with the soul overlord meat he had just obtained. A rich aroma rose and lingered in the celestial court. Yang Jian closed his eyes, reveling in it. He had to admire Bufang's cooking. The celestial dog narrowed its eyes, twitched its nose, and unconsciously walked toward Bufang. In a huge blue and white porcelain plate, a pot of soup was boiling, and the soul overlord meat was bubbling. The rich aroma seemed to turn into a colorful glow. Zhu Meng was taken aback. He thought Bufang only knew how to cook those stinky dark cuisines. The celestial dog walked with its eyes closed and bumped into Xiao Bai's body. With a thud, the dog felt a little dizzy. He opened his eyes. His eyes met Xiao Bai's purple eyes, which had turned toward him. His fur bristled, and he scrambled toward Yang Jian. "I haven't seen you for a long time. How did little Hu Li and Big Lump become so terrifying?" After a hearty meal, Bufang lay comfortably on the chair. He looked at Yang Jian indifferently, waiting for him to continue. "Owner Bu, I have a request." Yang Jian looked at Bufang and said, "Speak." Bufang had expected this, so he was not surprised. "If Owner Bu hadn't appeared today, I would have had a headache." Yang Jian took a deep breath and his eyes became sharp. "Owner Bu, do you know how many times the Celestial Court has been attacked in the past few days? A total of 10 waves, and their strength has gradually increased from weak to strong. The last wave was not long before Owner Bu appeared. I had just killed a squad of soul demons, and their leader was already close to the level of a chaotic saint." Yang Jian's face was very serious. The Celestial Emperor had also learned about this, and he had told him to resist the soul demons. But Yang Jian knew. He could resist this wave, but the next wave, the strength of the soul demons would only get stronger and stronger. At that time, even he might not be able to resist them. At that time, a fire in the backyard of the Celestial Court would be a disaster for the front line. "Oh!" Bufang paused and was a little surprised. Zhu Meng was also stunned. He thought of the 3 top soul demons who had appeared just now, and he shuddered. What kind of conspiracy were the soul demons who had infiltrated the primitive universe brewing? For the soul demons, the primitive universe was simply a paradise. Their strength could grow unscrupulously in the primitive universe. More and more top soul demons were appearing, which was not a good thing for the Celestial Court and the primitive universe. The primitive universe was very likely to fall into the hands of the soul demons. Bufang thought for a while, his brows furrowed. The purpose of the soul demon army attacking the primitive universe was to find the soul god's sealed body. These soul demons must have invaded the Celestial Court to find the soul god's sealed body. So Bufang did not refuse. "You want me to help you stop the soul demons, right?" Bufang asked. Yang Jian shook his head. "No, I need Owner Bu to help me capture a top soul demon alive. We need to know their purpose. I have a bad feeling about this." Capture him alive? It was not easy to capture a top soul demon alive. Bufang could not guarantee it. After all, a top soul demon was equivalent to a chaotic saint. They might not be a top chaotic saint like a duke, but their strength was not something ordinary people could compare with. It was possible to kill them, but it was very difficult to capture them alive. They could blow themselves up with just a thought. Bufang guessed that they were after the soul god's sealed body. However, this was just Bufang's guess. Bufang was not sure. Just when Bufang was hesitating, Yang Jian's expression suddenly changed. Buzz, he raised his hand, and the 3-pointed, double-edged knife fell into his grasp. A terrible aura exploded out of him. The aura of a saint of the Great Path towered into the sky. "Those guys are here again. Owner Bu, please." Yang Jian stood up. The celestial hound's aura changed, becoming ferocious. Bufang took a deep breath. He nodded. Then, he stood up and put his hands behind his back, his striped red and white vermilion robe fluttering. His confident and indifferent face was frightening. Then, capture him alive. Chapter 1794. Then let's capture him alive. Bufang said it very calmly. That kind of calmness came from the inside out. It was as easy as eating and drinking. The corners of Yang Jian's mouth curved upward. He admired Bufang's confidence. Zhu Mang sucked in a cold breath. This chef is too domineering. Yang Jian's request was to capture a top soul overlord alive. Capture him alive, not kill him. This required not only great strength, but the best he could do was kill him, not capture him alive. The celestial court was located in the 9th heaven, towering into the clouds and boundless. At this moment Yang Jian was fully armed. Holding the three-pointed, double-edged knife, his aura towered into the sky, and the vertical eye between his brows was emitting a divine light. He stood on an auspicious cloud, and behind him were the heavenly soldiers of the celestial court. A surging aura pervaded the 9th heaven. Bufang followed the army. Outside the celestial court, streaks of black energy surged into the sky, and each surge was extremely terrifying. Yang Jian's face was extremely grave. The black cloud of soul demons was rolling and becoming more and more terrifying. As it rose and fell, it seemed to destroy heaven and earth. The aura of their leader shook heaven and earth. And this time, it was not just one aura. Sure enough, the soul demons who attacked this time have become stronger again. Yang Jian said solemnly. He was now a saint of the Great Path, and with the help of the celestial dog, he was no weaker than a top saint of the Great Path. However, if he were to face a chaotic saint, he would be crushed. If he had not met Bufang, Yang Jian would have had a headache about how to get through this crisis. Once the celestial court fell, it would have an unimaginable impact on the front line. Zhu Mang had said that before Bufang came to the celestial court, he had killed many top soul overlords. This gave Yang Jian hope. Plop, plop. The heavenly soldiers of the celestial court all looked solemnly at the soul demons who were rushing into the sky. There were not many of them, but their auras were too strong. They were led by 5 top soul overlords, each of whom made the heavenly soldiers tremble. This was a tough battle, and it could be a desperate one. These days, the heavenly soldiers had been fighting the soul demons and had suffered countless casualties. If it weren't for true Lord Erling's protection, they would have been defeated long ago. 5 top-tier soul overlords. Bufang squinted his eyes and sighed. Gomang trembled slightly. These 5 top soul overlords should be all the top soul overlords who had sneaked into the primitive land. This time, they had all gathered to attack the immortal court. Could it be that something big was about to happen? What was the purpose of these soul demons? Yang Jian looked solemn. Bufang was also concentrating. Even Bufang did not have the confidence to capture a top-grade soul overlord alive. Even with the help of Little Hu and Xiao Bai, black smoke filled the sky as if it had turned into an ocean of sinful aura. His cold laughter swept through the heavens and 10,000 worlds. Boom! In the void, they transformed into 5 huge ferocious beasts, each of which looked extremely ferocious. In addition to these 5, there were thousands of soul demons behind them. Their auras merged into one. Fight! Protect the primitive land. Yang Jian's vertical eye burst into divine light, turned into a stream of light, and rushed into the crowd of soul demons, causing explosions. Then, he waved his 3-pointed, double-edged knife and roared. This was a battle of unequal strength. Owner Bu, it's up to you now. Before he set off, he gave Bufang a solemn look. Then, he charged out with the celestial dog. Bufang breathed a sigh of relief. Gomang also joined the battle and fought the soul demons. The celestial court was not Void City, after all, and its level was much lower. Although the heavenly soldiers were not weak, they were naturally at a disadvantage against these soul demons, who were either soul overlords or top-numbered soul demons. The soul demons seemed to have torn a huge hole in the celestial court's defense. Bufang's vermilion robe flapped noisily. "It's our turn," Bufang said lightly. Little Hu leaped up and landed in Bufang's arms. His eyes were narrowed, but there was a murderous look in them. Xiao Bai's purple eyes turned. Then, he turned into a beam of white light and rushed out in an instant. He went straight toward the 5 top soul overlords. The battle broke out in an instant. He wanted to capture a top soul overlord alive. For Bufang, it was a big challenge. He had never tried it before. Whitey was incomparably domineering. When it encountered a top-notch soul overlord, it fought and beat the other party up. Little Hu's fighting prowess was not weak. After all, he was Heaven God Destruction. He was able to suppress 2 top soul overlords. Xiao Bai and Little Hu each stopped 2 soul overlords. The last one was given to Bufang. It was a huge soul demon that looked like a rhinoceros. Its sharp horns seemed to tear the sky apart, and a terrible aura of sin filled the sky. "Chef!" The soul overlord seemed to recognize Bufang and let out a roar. Bufang paused slightly. His body moved in the sky. If he wanted to capture it alive, he could not use normal means. Bufang narrowed his eyes. Capture it with food? The corner of Bufang's mouth twitched slightly. He seemed to think that it was a good idea. Capturing it with food was the simplest and what Bufang was best at. I'll kill one first. I need to get some ingredients first. Bufang thought to himself. Then, he shook his hand. Golden light began to gather in his palm. A terrible fluctuation spread between heaven and earth. This was the aura of the chaos pot. Even a great soul overlord could not withstand a chaos pot, let alone a top soul overlord. This was also Bufang's strongest means. It was a piece of cake for him to kill gods and immortals. In fact, when Bufang took out the chaos pot, everyone had a lingering fear. The soul demons and the heavenly soldiers all looked over in horror. What was that? The terrible energy seemed to be a violent force that had fused with the essence of heaven and earth. If it exploded, would the celestial court be blown to pieces? Yang Jian's expression changed dramatically. "Owner Bu," he cried out in surprise. Bufang glanced at him and nodded. "I know what I'm doing," Bufang said. Yang Jian's forehead was beaded with sweat. He waved his 3-pointed, double-edged knife and cut a soul demon in half. I hope he really knows what he's doing. What were the soul demons trying to do? They had no idea. This was definitely not good news for them. Therefore, Yang Jian needed to capture a soul overlord alive to find out what the soul demons were up to. Bufang stepped on the void and kept moving. The rhinoceros soul overlord seemed to have a lingering fear. He turned and was about to flee. The sense of crisis that the chaos pot gave him was so strong that he did not dare to move at all. Rumble! However, with a flick of his finger, Bufang flicked his finger. The chaos pot drifted out, swaying in the air. In a flash, it streaked across the sky in a beam of light and smashed the soul overlord. Boom! An explosion broke out in an instant. At this moment, heaven and earth seemed to fall silent. The terrible explosion seriously injured the huge rhinoceros soul overlord. The oppressive aura in the chaos pot kept swirling. Many soul demons were knocked down with just one move. Not only the soul demons, but the celestial court soldiers were also horrified. What kind of technique is this? What kind of strength is this? It's almost as strong as the top experts of the primitive universe. Yang Jian was dumbstruck. The celestial hound was so scared that it pulled its tail back. Didn't you say you know what you're doing? Is this what you call knowing what you're doing? The corner of Yang Jian's mouth twitched. He knew Bufang's words could not be trusted. The huge rhinoceros soul overlord was killed by Bufang with a single blow, leaving only his corpse floating in midair. The soul demon's true form came out and was swallowed by the qilin in Bufang's body. Bufang contained the shockwaves of the battle, so no one was hurt. Now Bufang could barely control the chaos pot's power. Looking at the huge soul overlord, the dragon bone kitchen knife appeared in Bufang's hand. With one slash, the huge soul overlord's body was completely dissected by Bufang. He picked up the fattest piece of soul overlord meat. Then, Bufang cleaned the dragon bone kitchen knife and got ready to cook. To capture a soul overlord alive, he had to use gourmet food. There was a gourmet array called sealing. Although the effect of the gourmet array was not as strong now, it was still useful to Bufang. The meat was cut into thin and transparent pieces like a thin piece of paper. At a glance, one could see the lines on the meat. Bufang shook his hand and spun the knife. Then, the knife fell. Pieces of meat piled up on top of each other. It was like a flower that kept piling up. He took out the death spicy strip. He cut them into fine pieces and put them into a wok of oil along with the minced meat to fry them. Finally, it was ready. After shaking off the oil, Bufang piled the meat together. Bufang took out a small jar. Holding it in one hand, he gently patted the jar with the other. His palms were clapping rhythmically. Clap, 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 bits of spices floated down from the jar. The spices covered the food. It made the meat look like a dream. Boom! On one of his fingers, a scarlet divine flame surged. With a flick of his finger, he guided the flame into the food. The flame surged and soared into the sky in an instant. Just like that, a new dish with a burning flame came out of the wok. The flame burned, accompanied by the spiciness of the death spicy strip and the strange taste of the meat. It formed a unique dish. Bufang named this dish Half-Step Madness with a smile. If he took a bite, if he took half a step, he would burst out laughing, unable to control himself, intoxicated by the delicacy, and lose the ability to resist. With the death spicy strip as the catalyst, it could be said to be the most terrifying dark dish that Bufang had ever cooked. The darkness of this dish did not lie in the image or the taste. It was the effect. In the distance, Whitey beat up a top-grade soul overlord, and the latter's body was torn apart. On the other side, Little who kept bombarding and suppressing the enemy with firepower. Two top-notch spirit overlords were no match for a Little Fox. In fact, Bufang knew that if Little who went all out, these two soul overlords would probably die. Heaven God Destruction's power was not ordinary. Bam! Xiao Bai's fighting style was much more violent. He waved his huge palms and slapped one soul overlord with each slap. The two top soul overlords had a mental breakdown. The 5 top soul overlords were held up. For the soul demon army, it was a disaster. Many soul demons were killed by him. Some soul demons had already fled. The 2 soul overlords who were fighting Xiao Bai wanted to flee as well. How could they fight him? They could not find any weakness in this lump of iron. Xiao Bai, hold him down. Suddenly Bufang's faint voice rang out. Xiao Bai's purple eyes lit up. In the blink of an eye, he appeared in front of a soul overlord who was turning to flee. He pressed a big palm against the soul overlord's head. Then Bufang floated over. He was holding a dish in his hand. The thin soul overlord's meat was like burnt paper, and the lines on it were very obvious. Bufang floated in front of the soul overlord that Xiao Bai had pinned down. His mind flickered. The thin soul overlord's meat was wrapped in deep-fried death spicy strip. Accompanied by flames, he stuffed it into the soul overlord's mouth. The soul overlord was terrified. You, the soul overlord roared. However, just as he roared, he let out a hearty laugh under everyone's gazes in the next moment. He simply could not stop laughing, the kind that came from the bottom of his heart. Step by step, Bufang asked Xiao Bai to subdue the other soul overlord. He stuffed the dish into their mouths. Before long, the four top soul overlords hugged each other in midair, and kept laughing. They laughed until tears gushed out of their eyes. The celestial court's soldiers in the sky were also dumbfounded. The corner of Yang Jian's mouth twitched violently as he flew over. You said you would capture one soul overlord alive. King captured 4 of them? You're such a terrifying chef. Chapter 1795. Yang Jian was indeed a little dumbfounded. He had thought that it would be difficult for Bu Fang to capture a top soul overlord alive, but now it seemed that it was not the case. Of the 5 top soul overlords, 1 was killed and 4 were captured alive. This result was simply amazing. The chef's strength had improved too fast. Last time on the ancestral planet, Bu Fang had a hard time facing a saint of the Great Path. But now, in such a short time, Bu Fang was able to capture 4 chaotic saint-level soul overlords alive. This progress was really terrifying. What's going on with them? Yang Jian asked, looking at the 3 top soul overlords, who were tied up by the chains of law and laughing wildly in the distance. They're laughing, Bu Fang replied faintly. To capture the soul demons, one must first capture their stomach. As a chef, Bu Fang knew this very well. Yang Jian's face stiffened slightly. Do I need you to tell me that? Everyone knows that these soul overlords are laughing. Half-step epilepsy with a smile. Do you want to know more about this dish? Bu Fang shook his hand, and the half-step epilepsy with a smile appeared. He picked up a piece of meat with a pair of chopsticks, mixed the death spicy strip into it, rolled it into a ball, and handed it to Yang Jian. Yang Jian's pupils constricted. The 3 soul overlords had eaten this dish, and that was why they had become crazy. How could he eat it? He couldn't eat it. He must not eat it. Yang Jian's head shook like a rattle. His 3 eyes rolled, and he handed the dish that Bu Fang had put away to the celestial dog next to him. The dog was already drooling. How could it know what it could and could not eat? When it saw Yang Jian hand it the dish, it opened its mouth and took a bite. It bit down. The surrounding experts widened their eyes in disbelief. The celestial dog's eyes narrowed into slits, then it raised its leg and took a step. Suddenly, the howling celestial hound's eyes widened. The fur on his body was about to explode. The next moment, it opened its mouth and laughed like it was having an asthma attack. Its head was pressed against Yang Jian's foot, and it could not stop laughing. The surrounding people looked at each other. Yang Jian felt a chill run down his spine. Fortunately, he didn't eat it. This dish is poisonous. The kind that would make people laugh to death with one bite? Bu Fang didn't mind. He put away the demented smile. As for tasting it himself, that was impossible. In the distance, 4 soul overlords and a howling celestial dog were laughing. Laughter reverberated between heaven and earth. The celestial soldiers and heavenly generals followed Yang Jian and escorted a group of 4 soul demons back to the celestial court. So, how do you plan to get the words out of them? Bu Fang looked at Yang Jian in confusion. They had captured the soul overlord alive, but how to deal with him was still a problem. A golden rope appeared in Yang Jian's hand, fell, and tied the 4 soul overlords up. It doesn't matter. As long as we capture them alive, we'll definitely be able to get some information from them. A confident smile appeared on Yang Jian's face. Within the immortal court there were many immortal gods. There were countless immortal gods with all sorts of abilities. Thus, it was easy for them to ask a question. Bu Fang nodded and did not continue to pay attention to him. Yang Jian, on the other hand, sent someone to arrange accommodations for Bu Fang and Gomang. He also brought them fine wine and delicious food. Yang Jian, on the other hand, could not wait to interrogate the soul overlord. He was a little excited. These soul overlords definitely had a purpose for attacking the celestial court, and that purpose was, they had to pry the information out of the soul overlord's mouth. Bufang moved into the accommodation Yang Jian had arranged for him. It was located in a pavilion with a good location and was surrounded by swirling immortal energy. After settling in, Bufang sat cross-legged on the ground and cooked a dish under the starry sky. He slowly savored the dish and the fairy flower wine that Yang Jian had brought him, feeling the rare comfort of the celestial court. After settling in, Bufang sat cross-legged on the ground and cooked a dish under the starry sky. He slowly savored the dish and the fairy flower wine that Yang Jian had brought him, feeling the rare comfort of the celestial court. Rumble! Yang Jian's face was extremely unsightly. He walked out of the celestial court's prison. Purple thunderbolts kept falling from the sky and smashing into the prison, causing miserable howls to ring out of it. Damn it! These soul demons are really going to destroy the foundation of the primitive universe. Yang Jian's face was full of fear. If he did not capture these soul demons alive this time, the consequences would be unimaginable. He had thought that the battlefield of the ninth heaven, guarded by the supreme existences, should be impregnable. But now it seemed that was not the case. What should I do? Yang Jian frowned with a sad face. He had to report this to the Celestial Emperor. He took a deep breath, stepped on an auspicious cloud, and flew toward the soaring heaven palace. Then, he entered the palace. The Lingshao King Palace, which used to be bustling with noise and excitement, was now left with only a few small immortals. On a high seat, dazzling golden light flickered, and a majestic and enormous figure sat on top of it, ruling over the world. This was the Celestial Emperor, the Lord of the primitive universe's celestial court. Yang Jian came to the palace and told the Celestial Emperor what he had just asked the four top soul overlords. The Celestial Emperor opened his eyes abruptly. Clearly, the news was also unbelievable to him. The soul demons really have such a plan? The Celestial Emperor's eyes widened, and they shone brightly. Every word I said is true. If these soul demons tell a lie, their souls will be destroyed. Yang Jian said seriously. I'll leave this matter to you. You must do it well. Don't let the soul demons take advantage of us. The primordial world is not something that these demons can covet. His words shook heaven and earth, causing them to tremble. Yang Jian received the order and quickly retreated out of the palace. After leaving the palace, he sped to find Bufang. He came to the courtyard. Bufang was sitting cross-legged in the middle of the courtyard, drinking wine and tasting some dishes. Bufang glanced at him as he landed. Did you get the answer? Bufang asked. Yang Jian nodded, his face grave. The purpose of the soul demons is to find the divine artifact of the soul demon universe. They want to bring it back to the soul demon universe. Those things are lost in the primitive universe. Yang Jian said. Bufang twitched the corner of his mouth. What divine artifact? Their goal is the soul god's sealed body. Yang Jian's expression changed. It seemed that Bufang knew everything. Did they tell you where the sealed body is? Bufang asked curiously. Yang Jian sighed. This was what made his face unsightly. I don't know. But they need the Celestial Emperor's seal. They should be trying to open something, Yang Jian said. Bufang nodded and did not ask any more questions. Owner Bu, Yang Jian said. He was about to speak, but Bufang shook his head. Well, the Celestial Emperor's seal shouldn't be so easily taken away by the soul demons, right? I can't help you with this. Send me to the battlefield. I have to go there, Bufang said. The soul demons needed the Celestial Emperor's seal. In Bufang's opinion, the Celestial Emperor's seal was not so easy to get. After all, it was something controlled by the Lord of the Celestial Court. If the soul demons wanted to get it, they had to win first and break through the front line. Only then would they have a chance to attack the Celestial Court and get the seal. These sneaky little fights could not deal with the Celestial Court. In fact, Bufang knew it as well. This time, even without his help, the Celestial Court would still be intact. After all, it was the celestial court, a power that had existed in the primitive universe for countless years. Yang Jian sighed. He had wanted to ask Bufang to stay and ask Bufang for help. After all, Bufang's current means were too useful to deal with the soul demons. All right. Tomorrow, I will send Owner Bu to the battlefield beyond the ninth heaven. Yang Jian nodded and said. Outside the starry sky, Yang Jian left. Bufang sat cross-legged in the courtyard, quietly sipping wine. His eyes were deep. The next day, Yang Jian had indeed sent someone to send him to the battlefield of the stars. The blue luan spread its wings. With Xiaopi, Little Hu, and Xiao Bai, Bufang boarded the blue luan's back. The bird spread its wings and soared into the sky, heading toward the battlefield beyond the ninth heaven. Yang Jian held the three-pointed, double-edged knife in his hand. At his side was the celestial dog, who was still convulsing and laughing. Gomang did not join the battlefield. He stayed in the celestial court to protect the primitive universe. The battlefield was located in the boundless starry sky beyond the ninth heaven. The azure luan's speed was much faster than Gomang's white crane. It flew like a streak of starlight. After a long time, sitting cross-legged on the blue luan's back, Bufang narrowed his eyes. He raised his head and looked into the distance. There, a vast and dilapidated city that stretched across the starry sky of the universe appeared before his eyes. From a distance, there seemed to be divine dragons and divine phoenixes flying over the city. Bufang took a deep breath. The shocking feeling the city gave him was incomparably powerful. It was as if scarlet blood was washing over his face. The smell of blood made people's pores constrict. Before he got close, he could feel his blood boiling. In that city, the blood of countless primitive universe almighties flowed. That was a city that was built with blood. It was the last barrier to protect the primitive universe. Exalted immortal, that city is the battlefield of stars. Hangu Pass. We can't go any further. We can only leave Exalted Immortal here. The Blue Luan said. The closer she got to Hangu Pass, the more she felt the pressure in her blood. In Hangu Pass, it was as if the blood of her ancestors was flowing, making her heart palpitate from the depths of her soul. Landing on a dilapidated star, Bufang nodded at the Blue Luan. The latter spread its wings and flew away. Bufang turned his head to look at the vast Hangu Pass. It was depressing and heavy. He exhaled. Bufang stepped through the starry sky and walked step by step toward Hangu Pass. Xiao Bai followed closely behind. Lying on Xiao Bai's head, Little Hu and Xiaopi blinked and looked into the distance. Hangu Pass was an ancient city that stretched across the starry sky and suppressed the galaxy. Bufang had been walking for a long time, but he had not gotten close. Buzz, a few days after Bufang left, the light in front of him finally changed. It was as if he had passed through some invisible array, and the distant Hangu Pass was right in front of him. The sky was blood-red, as if it had been dyed with blood. The mottled walls were covered with the marks of time, knife marks, sword marks, axe marks, and all kinds of marks. They looked like glorious medals. Bufang stepped onto the solid ground of Hangu Pass. A majestic pressure spread from the bottom of his feet and landed on his body. It felt as if he had stepped into District D of Void City. But what was different was that the air here seemed to be filled with the aura of slaughter. Suddenly, a shrill cry rang out. A loud cry resounded through heaven and earth. A beam of black light arrived in a flash and hovered over Bufang's head. It spread its huge wings and seemed to be tens of thousands of miles away. The colossal creature's body shrank, then it turned into a familiar figure. With a ripping sound, it tore through the air. It landed on Bufang's shoulder. The ninth heaven Kuan Pring? Bufang paused. He did not expect to see the Kuan Pring here. When they parted on Earth, Bufang thought he would not see it again. He did not expect that it would come to Hangu Pass. Except for the ninth heaven Kuan Pring, Bufang also sensed a familiar aura. He looked up into the distance. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.